Okay, great. It's 5:30, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, great. It's 5:30, folks. Thanks for tuning in all across Milpitas, whether you're on YouTube.com or Facebook live stream. What an exciting night we have here. It's really a pastime. It's the budget meeting here at City Hall, and just so excited to take part in my sixth budget meeting here. If you don't know it now, we're headed toward budget season, folks. So really excited for Councilmember Chua. Really, your first full fiscal year you're going to make an impact on here. So and to my colleagues that have been on the council, let's continue to bring forward a great leadership for our budget. So with that being said, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we'll go to our city clerk, Wendy Wood, for the roll call.
Okay. Councilmember Chua?
Here.
Councilmember Dominguez?
Present.
Councilmember Fan? Vice Mayor Montano?
Here.
Mayor Tran?
Here. Thank you very much, Wendy. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, next up here, we're moving along. Next up is the approval of the agenda. I'll move to approve the agenda. Need a second.
Second.
We have a second from Councilmember Dominguez. We'll go to the vote. Councilmember Chua.
Aye.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Fan. Okay, I think he'll be joining us shortly. Vice Mayor Montano.
Aye.
Myself is an aye. The agenda is approved. We're moving on here to public forum. Let's check the Zoom. I want to welcome all our panelists, department directors, chiefs, support staff, everybody in the organization. We gather here tonight for our special city council meeting. Furthermore, I do want to welcome our community members, our attendees here on the Zoom tonight. I want to give kudos to, I think, the PIO for putting out the Zoom link on social media. That was pretty neat to see. Folks are just a click away from wherever they're at to participate in tonight's meeting, and looking forward to future meetings as well. So thank you to our community members that are joining us tonight. I do see some familiar names and some new names as well. It's the public forum, folks. We'll do 2 minutes for the public forum tonight. There is another opportunity to speak during the agenda item per usual. And if folks would like to discuss perhaps things that aren't agendized tonight, now would be the time for your comment here in the public forum. 2 minutes tonight. If you're on the Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand, and we'll be delighted to call upon you to share your comments. I'll look for any virtual raised hands. Seeing none, going once, going twice. That's it with public comment for the forum. Let's move forward here to announcements. Let's go to our city manager, Stephen McHarris.
Thank you, Mayor Tran. I have no announcements for this special study session.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Any announcements from the council? We are in a series of meetings, public. We had a meeting last Tuesday. We have another meeting next Tuesday. So plenty of opportunities for announcements. My colleagues are welcome to raise their virtual hand. And if there are any, okay, great. We'll move on here to the announcement of conflict of interest and campaign contributions. We'll go to our city attorney, Christopher Diaz.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to note, ask the council the question. that we do ask, which is mandated by our open government ordinance. So at this time, I'd ask the mayor and each council member whether he or she has any financial or personal conflict of interest related to any of the items on tonight's agenda. And you just have one item, and that's just to receive a staff presentation on the budget. So I'm going to assume that there's no conflicts of interest, but I'll still go down the line just to confirm. So Councilmember Chua?
None.
Thank you. Councilmember Dominguez?
None.
Thank you. Councilmember Fan?
None.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Montano?
None.
Thank you. And Mayor Tran?
None.
Let the record reflect none to the first question, and then I will not ask the second question only because I don't believe there's any contracts or development project applicants on tonight's agenda, so we'll forego that last question. But for the first question, there are no conflicts of interest this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. If you can also help us with the next item on the agenda, thank you.
I believe I forgot, but yes, what
No,
you
you're
have
fine.
before you is the Milpitas City Council Code of Conduct, so I'll go ahead and read it. Be respectful and courteous. Words, tone, and body language do matter. Model civility. Avoid surprises. Praise publicly and criticize privately. Focus on the issue, not the person. Refrain from using electronic devices while on the council dais and while we're on Zoom during this Omicron surge. That would include the Zoom platform tonight. Disclose conflicts of interest and affiliations related to agenda items. Separate governing from campaigning. The council speaks with one voice after making policy on issues. Respect the line between policy and administration. And then finally, council will hold one another accountable to comply with this code of conduct. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And we'll move to the approval of the agenda. I'll move to approve the agenda. Need a second.
Second.
We have a second from Councilmember Dominguez. We'll go to the vote. Councilmember Chua.
Aye.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Montano.
Aye.
And myself as an aye. The agenda is approved. Let's have a great meeting tonight. Certainly the beginning here of a really, I think, a hopeful a budget season, considering all that we've been through as an organization, and the pandemic really shook us. But I know that tonight is the beginning of seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, and looking forward to just a positive outlook and a sort of a feeling, and it'll be an efficient meeting with great public service. With that being said, let's go to our city manager, Stephen McHarris.
Well, thank you, Mayor Tran. This item is to receive a staff report on the preliminary fiscal year 2023 through 32 10-year general fund financial forecast and provide feedback on desired service levels to inform the fiscal year 2022 to 23 budget development. And I would like to say good evening. I hope we meet your expectations and your kind words this evening. Mayor Tran, council members, and members of the public. It is my pleasure this evening to present this preliminary 2023 through 32 10-year general fund financial forecast for the city of Milpitas. As part of this discussion, we're also going to review the top line results of our recent FM3 community survey, our department accomplishments and work plans, and our city council referrals. I have some very good news in that we continue to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, which began almost 2 years ago in March 2020. While we are now in the third surge of COVID with the Omicron, it appears we have reached the peak. We continue to emphasize how critical it is that more Americans are vaccinated and boosted in order to mitigate severe symptoms and enable a swift timeline back to normal activities. At the local level, it is great to see that our Milpitas workforce unemployment has dropped to pre-pandemic levels at 2.9% in December. So we continue to be optimistic about the year ahead. We're grateful that we reflect on the collective effort that has placed us in our current conservative fiscal position. The City Council leadership has been remarkable in timely financial decisions, healthcare crisis response, and small business assistance. City staff stepped up in many ways, including concessions by 4 of our 6 bargaining groups, and all of our employees going above and beyond to serve our residents and businesses. City residences and businesses have come together, especially in support of Measure F and our 1/4 cent sales tax. We were also fortunate in the past year with receipts of one-time revenues that helped restore our general fund reserves. So we're reporting this evening that our top 3 revenues, property tax, sales tax, license and permits, are each trending slightly upward. However, we do need to be mindful that the Federal Reserve has announced that it will increase interest rates, which may play out in easing of personal and business consumption. Another major indicator is the record high consumer price index, along with ongoing supply chain challenges that are affecting the economic landscape. Taking this into consideration with other factors, our forecast assumes a moderate revenue recovery with several contingencies, which Finance Director Lauren Lai will address this evening. We're also hopeful that our revenue fiscal discipline continues to be primary in our approach. Our preliminary forecast for fiscal year 22-23 includes restoring only positions that council defunded for 6 months to a year from the general fund and maintain service levels similar to this fiscal year. As a reminder, because of COVID revenue losses, the council defunded 23.75 staff positions last year. Since then, we restored 9 in the form of 6 ARPA-funded public safety positions and 3 non-safety general fund positions, which leaves 14.75 positions still defunded. This highlights the ongoing staff capacity challenges we have in providing existing services, let alone taking on new projects. Keeping that in mind, tonight we seek council feedback on your top priorities as we develop the remainder of the budget in the upcoming months. You may recall that over the past 2 fiscal years, I promised our budget study sessions with, actually, I premised, not promised, our budget study sessions with a financially conservative, a dollar saved is a dollar earned approach. And we continue to have structured the budget on the council's 7 priority areas as the pillars of our city budget, which include community wellness, economic development, environment, governance, neighborhoods and housing, public safety, and transportation. Later this evening, staff will present the council referrals, and in doing so, we'll need to be mindful that these referrals may have a budget impact and may increase spending. Speaking to our general fund, our reserves remain critical to our fiscal stability, and I'm noting these reserves remain very strong. This can be demonstrated in comparing Milpitas to other Santa Clara County cities, such as Santa Clara, Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, by using their published fiscal 2020 audits. Our findings show that Milpitas general fund reserves rank second highest of these cities as a percentage of general fund operating budget. We can go even further in comparable cities with Fremont, Redwood City, and Pleasanton, and our findings remain the same. I'm highlighting this point because later tonight, Director Lai will discuss strategies pertaining to our general fund PERS balance and reserve policies for council consideration. Please listen closely as she carefully describes how pension actuaries guide our recommendation. I thank the City Council for your leadership as we continue to recover and rebuild. We also greatly appreciate the public for all your engagement and support. To the public, please stay tuned for the upcoming budget-related community town halls as we look forward to your participation. And to our city employees, you've been stellar on all levels in working together to serve Milpitas. The budget development is a comprehensive planning and engagement process, and more will be forthcoming in the months ahead. With this, I would like to turn it over to Public Information Officer Charmaine Angelo, who will present the recent community survey along with our FM3 consultant, followed by a financial presentation by Finance Director Lauren Lai, and lastly, the city accomplishments, work plans, and council referrals will be presented by Assistant City Manager Ishwini Kantak and Deputy City Manager Walter Rossman. So I'm looking forward to our collective discussion and feedback. Thank you very much, and we'll turn it over to Charmaine. She's going to be bringing up this PowerPoint. Here we go.
Um,
Mayor Tran,
Sure.
we may be having some issues getting Charmaine on. So why don't we get started? And I can hand it off to Kurt Bello from FM3, who's going to walk you through the top line results of the community engagement survey. We have done this every year for the past 3 years. And although we don't have all of the results, we'll be bringing you the complete survey results in February. We do have the top line results. Really excited to see some of the positive feedback we're getting from the survey. And then once Kurt has walked you through these results, we'll also talk about other community engagement tools that we're going to be using for the budget development process. So with that, if I can hand it off to Kurt Bello.
Thank you, Ashwini. I am Kurt Bello from FM3 Research. Happy to present a couple of these results. As Ashwini noted, we just finished the survey. Maybe go to the next slide, or one more slide. Yeah, perfect. We just got the results and our analysis pulled out of the field early last week. We didn't have time to pull together a detailed presentation and everything for the reporting requirements for this meeting, but we're working on that, as Ashwini noted, and we'll have our usual excessively detailed analysis for the council later on. But a couple of the key things I want to go over here before I talk about the methodology. Similar one we've used in the past, contacting residents through a variety of different methods, letting people take the survey online or via phone, offering the survey on the phone in multiple different languages. And the margin of sampling error for this is around 4%. So this is all very similar to prior years. Let me go to the next slide here. There's just 3 slides in here. I know you have a very large deck of information to get through. A couple of the key things that we just pulled out of the top line we thought would be helpful to frame these conversations are people like living in Milpitas, and it hasn't really changed. 83% are satisfied with the quality of life. I'm looking at a couple of comparisons now that we didn't have at the time, and that's gone up a few points from 79% last year. That 91% described the city as accepting. That's actually up 5 points from last year. People believe the city is safe. That's down 3 points. Anything in this 1 to 4 to 5 range is kind of margin of error differences. And I think the big thing here is the city is seen as accepting, it's safe, it's welcoming and celebrates different cultures. People are proud to live here in the city. And there's a relatively high level of trust for the city's plans for the future. And virtually all these numbers are similar or a couple points more positive than they were in the survey we conducted in 2021. So it's good news to hear. Maybe we go to the next slide. So yeah, I kind of hit on that first bullet point a second ago here. I think that if we're looking for areas, and this will come as no surprise to any members of the council here, if we're looking for areas of, well, where there's a little bit of angst and hand wringing, it's about affordability. We described the city, had a variety of words and phrases that we use in the survey. We've done this in the past. We asked them to describe the city, and respondents said, well, this describes the city well, or it doesn't. They're all mostly, all positive phrases. And large majorities said, oh yeah, this describes the city well. The one where it was sort of split was affordable. 45%, we don't have it displayed here, described the city as affordable, and 51 said it is not affordable. That's pretty comparable to where it was in 2021. So again, not a surprise, but lots of positive impressions of the city. Affordability is not one of them right now. That's not particularly unique to Milpitas in the Bay Area, and also is consistent with some of the remarks your city manager just had a minute ago about inflation and CPI. In terms of impressions of growth in the city, if you lump everyone who says the city is growing too fast, 41%. So about 2 in 5 feel like the city is growing too fast. Similar percentage, 45% feel like it's growing at the right pace. That's actually an interesting number. It is kind of looks more like the 2020 survey we conducted for the city. In 2021, we had only 35% felt like the city was growing too fast. But back in 2020, it was 41%. So some of these things, the city's inclusivity, those haven't changed throughout the pandemic. People like living in Milpitas, they're proud of it. Things along the lines of growth are very much been impacted by the pandemic, and maybe perceptions where things were not growing too fast for some folks last go around, and that probably because that was true. There were fewer projects happening in the last, during the course of the last 2 years. And that's starting to look more like perceptions of growth back in 2020. And potentially most importantly for your purposes here for the rest of this discussion is we went through a whole series of services that the city offers and asked individuals to rate their priorities, and public safety items and infrastructure items were at the top of that list as they've been in prior years. One more slide here. And it's when we ask residents to be amateur budget analysts. And this is without giving them the context of what these things really cost. We say, if you have a hypothetical $100 budget and these 6 categories that the city allocates here, how would you divide that up? And so we don't go through, well, this costs this or this costs Y, but it gives us a sense of how they would distribute those funds. And you'll see public safety is the biggest bucket there. So out of the $100, $22.50 was the mean number that people would dedicate to public safety. And then other ones are all a little kind of closely clumped together there. Maybe you would look at this and say neighborhoods and housing and economic development kind of in a second tier, and the other items were maybe a little more in the third tier. But this may be helpful when you're thinking through your discussions tonight and looking at the different budget information that the staff is presenting you, keeping in mind this is how residents would allocate a $100 budget for the city. So with that, I think I'm supposed to give it back to Charmaine. I don't know whether we fixed that technical difficulty yet.
Yep, I'm here. Thanks,
Okay.
Kurt. Thanks. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Apologies as I had technical difficulties logging on. But anyhow, as you know, we are deeply committed to utilizing various communication tools to have ongoing engagement with our residents and other stakeholders. So Kurt already provided top-line information about our latest survey, but the survey is only one of the many community engagement tools we intend to use. In the next 3 months, we will be deploying an online survey through Open Town Hall, which is similar to what we did last year, where we will be asking participants questions associated with council priority areas. We also have a number of employee budget meetings lined up, as well as additional community town halls, additional budget study sessions, and a public hearing on the budget adoption. Next slide, please. We will be socializing information across a variety of digital platforms, such as our city-owned channels like Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, and our city website, where we will have a dedicated budget page, plus our electronic newsletter, Milpitas Matters, and our printed quarterly newsletter, Connected. This will all be done hand in hand with community meetings that will be broadcasted through Facebook and our YouTube channel. And our hope is that we would be able to gather your our community's input and also amplify important information about the budget process and get your input. This concludes our presentation. And I think we'd like to open the floor for questions if there are any questions.
We'll go to the council here with any questions. We welcome your virtual raised hands. I want to welcome the folks, Kurt, and your organization for being back here. It's always a treat to see the survey results. I believe we'll have this item agendized for another meeting, and we'll go more in depth. And that's always a fun night. But just to get some information tonight is delightful, and so far, so good. Any questions from the council? Seeing no virtual raised hands. Back to you, Charmaine.
So hearing no questions, then we'll pass on the presentation to Lauren Lai.
Thanks, Charmaine. Good evening, Mayor, councils, and members of the public. I'm really
pleased to be launching this year's budget session with the public. And so if we can get to the next slide, just let folks know, again, this is a preliminary view and look into our general fund and the forecasts. Tonight we'll go over a couple of major areas, look at the calendar so we could all share what an inclusive process this is and that we're tracking pretty well with the calendar. Also look at the preliminary 10-year general fund forecast, look at the service level that it entails, some major assumptions and some trends that I want to highlight tonight. Spend a good amount of quality of time on strategies because I think that's where we can add a lot of value in this process as we look at our service level and funding our infrastructure. Last but not least, reflect upon our policies for reserves, see if there's opportunities for us to refine them, make them more dynamic and reflective of information we know. And then certainly throughout this process, we're seeking feedback about service levels, improvements, and especially priorities. Next slide, please. All right, this is the calendar. As you could see there, we have multiple opportunities for the public to engage. We have several opportunities for us to connect with the council starting tonight. We've done the survey concurrently. We'll also have the capital improvement project budget, which is independent and separate of the operating budget. That'll be forthcoming as well in a few weeks. We'll bring forward a mid-year report and a master fee schedule study during the spring. And then in May, we'll have the presentation of the proposed budget and the adoption in June. Next slide, please. Great. Always like to start with the fiscal outlook and the economic big picture. As the mayor and the city manager remarked, we are optimistic that we are coming out of this pandemic and we are in a state of recovery. While we're in the third surge, we're really hoping that there's going to still be a lot of mobility, and the numbers that I'll show represent that the economy is still recovering, especially here locally. We always like to look at what the state is doing, what the state economic specialists are saying, and they're seeing here that the trend is showing about a 3.7% growth on average through 25-26. So that correlates pretty well with some of our assumptions. We want to make sure that we are being moderate and or slightly conservative in some of our assumption areas, given the state of our recovery. Gross domestic product also estimated to increase by 2.8%. And so on average, between 3 to 4% seems to be the barometer of economists' forecast. As the city manager remarked, really pleased on a labor side that the unemployment here in the city has resumed pre-pandemic level at 2.9%. It's a stark contrast to where we were at the beginning of the pandemic, right? And 12.9 is pretty astounding. And so that really shows this V activity that we had in our economy, right? Cannot lose sight when we talk about fiscal outlook, what's happening in the consumer price index, CPI. Couple ways of measuring, right? All products, which includes energy, transportation, and food, that would be about 7%, measured December to December. If you take out food and energy, another measurement called CPI, all urban San Francisco, that's about 4.2%. Takeaway there is this is a very expensive trend that also plays out in our cost as well as government. And as the city manager remarked, we need to continue to focus on what's happening at the Fed Reserve level as to how that might impact consumers and businesses alike, and also the market itself. Next slide, please. This is a very informative slide in that it shows how much the COVID impacted the city's general fund. The city's general fund is approximately $115 million. In 2 years, it dropped these pink categories of revenue by approximately $30 million. The city council and the collective leadership of the community, the businesses, the city staff turned this around. And in the box below, we implemented a variety of strategies, right? Measure F, defunded CIP, used reserves, had interfund transfer, deferred maintenance, defunded mostly vacant positions, employee concessions, and other one-time revenue. But we wanted to insert this slide to illuminate what we went through and where we are today. Next slide, please. So what's in the general fund forecast? Importantly, first and foremost, that should probably be in bold, is that it's structurally balanced. Okay, that's really important because that's the foundation of fiscal sustainability until Measure F expires. And so we'll continue to focus on what we do leading up to Measure F's expiration. It's preliminary. We're continuing to research and monitor and seek feedback. Importantly is that the forecast does not assume what we call proposals or, in essence, enhanced services. So 23's budget right now assumes pretty consistent service as we see today, with a slight increase because we are restoring some positions. It does not adjust staff capacity, so we just have to be mindful of that as we look at service level and or new projects. And importantly is that it doesn't envision using reserves to balance the budget. I always like to emphasize that aside from these numbers, we need to focus on the strategy, which is big picture economic development, which drives our employment, it drives our businesses and our general fund to provide services. We are always looking and counting our dollars and cents through cost management. And we always have to continue to think about how we innovate in doing our work better using technology and partnerships. And last but not least, what we need to do also really well is prioritizing our services, programs, and projects. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Measure F and ARPA during these times. These are our saving graces, honestly. And so Measure F bringing in about $6 million a year, and then ARPA, which is our federal funding of $16.8 million, really helping in the area of community service, affordable housing, small businesses, and public safety in our parks. Next slide, please. So this is a 10-year forecast of the general fund, starting with the current year, fiscal 22 through fiscal 32, similar to last year under Walter Rossman's leadership and the city manager, assistant city manager. It shows a surplus and it's structurally balanced. These are annual surpluses. Again, this does not reflect any enhanced services and any services that we may consider in the upcoming few months as we refine the budget. But importantly is that we're in a surplus position until 29-30 when Measure F expires. Okay, so that's really where we want to be. So now let's dive into the details of what this entails. Next slide, please. Importantly is the priority areas. Before we look into the departments and the specifics, we're reminded of the 7 priority areas: community wellness, economic development, environment, governance, neighborhood and housing, public safety, transportation, and transit. These really are the pillar of our services and our dollars and cents. Next slide, please. All right, so general fund revenue is about $116 million. What are the different sources and how is it allocated? You could see here in this bar chart, property taxes are #1 revenue source by far. And it's really, that's good because it created a lot of stability. A couple of slides ago when I talked about the $30 million loss during COVID, property tax actually was very stable and it actually offsetted some of the losses. And so that's really good for us. It created a lot of stability. Followed by sales and use tax. I added the Measure F up there to illustrate that economically, sales and use tax is very significant. So what happens right now with consumption and business consumption is something we're going to continue to be very watchful of. Followed by license permit, TOTs, and other categories. Prior to the pandemic, TOT was at about 14.5, so it was the 3rd ranking revenue. And it's climbing out of its 4th position, which I'll talk about in a few more slides. Next slide, please. Consistent with FM3 survey, we want to know, where are our general fund dollars being spent? Do they align with the survey priority areas? And certainly you could see here, public safety, top 2 bars, 38 million more or less for police and about 28 million for fire, followed by public works as well. If we could switch to the next slide, it shows the percentage allocation, which is a little bit easier to read sometimes than the dollar and cents, but this correlates very well with the feedback we've gotten over the years. So I wanted to really demonstrate that to the council and the public. Next slide, please.
So now we're going to dive into the two categories of our budget, revenue and expenses. So on the expenditure side, like so much of what we do in governance, it's data driven. We look at the historical trends, but we're also very mindful that historical trends do not guarantee the trajectory of the future. So we work with experts, topic matter experts and departments who run these amazing programs to exercise judgment in developing our budget. Want to definitely talk about property tax, our number one revenue source. Fiscal 23, we're assuming a 4% increase. Some may say, boy, that's so conservative. Well, there's a couple contingencies I want to talk about. One is property tax ERAFT. Okay, what is ERAFT, right? Simple way of putting it is that the state allocates money to schools. Once the school allocation is met monetarily, there's a formula that allocates the excess to the county and to the cities. There is a dispute, a legal dispute about that formula. So what the county has suggested is that we conservatively reduce our budget by 15% in this revenue source, just in case local jurisdictions don't prevail. The total ERAF is about 2.3 million. We don't foresee losing all of that, but we did walk our ERAF revenue down by 15%. The other contingency we might want to be mindful of is property owners have a right to appeal their assessed valuation, even under Prop 13. So the county has a backlog of appeals. And so if the property owners prevail, their property tax gets reduced, and that flows down to a reduced property tax revenue to the city, right? So the 4% is something that we feel is moderate given these contingencies out there. Next is sales tax. We work with HDL. HDL is a topic matter expert throughout the state of California. They almost have 100% of the state confidential database of sales tax to be able to help model and give us estimates and forecasts for our city. What they're showing, and we've seen it in our Q3 report, is significant improvements for fiscal 22, which I'll go into, but they're forecasting kind of a leveling off of the hot market in 23 and thereafter. Many of you, especially elected official, are aware that with the shift to online shopping, a lot of our revenue is shift to what's called county pool. The county pool nuance changes the way revenue gets allocated to the city. So that creates a level of detail in our forecasting as well. The fourth category of our revenue is TOT. Want to spend some time on that. Big picture is that we're forecasting 8% increase next year. We saw some good growths in the summer and then some leveling off in the fall, which I'll go into in a little bit. Last but not least, the fire department through the SAFER grant for firefighters, for the ambulance service. We're still awaiting the FEMA response. Absent that, we're incorporating the scheduled revenues in the grant. So that's about $221,000 for next year. Next slide, please. So let's go through the sales tax. We have two categories of sales tax, and I want to go through them because they behave differently. One is called the 1% Bradley-Burns, which is the 1% we get from the state sales tax before Measure F came along. So what happened in this category? Well, you could see there that pre-pandemic in 2019, we actually had a peak of almost 28 million. As some of you may recall, the timeline of COVID was March of 2020, which meant it was one quarter of fiscal 20. You could see how our revenue declined by a quarter in 20, and it declined further with 12 months of sales tax loss because of shelter in place and all the craziness during the COVID first and second surge. Good news, mobility, vaccination, boosting, just better everything. You could see our numbers showing. Also, stimulus coming into the economy, people feeling confident, it really shows. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, the forecast assumes 3 to 3.5% in the next 2 out years. And you could see there the comparison of July through August relative to last year's 12 months. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to talk about Measure F separately. Measure F, as some of you may recall, received an overwhelming approval by voters in November of 2020. It's an 8-year quarter-cent sales tax, which sunsets, meaning that it will expire, starts April 1, 2021 through April 1, 2028. So why does Lauren distinguish Measure F separately? Well, it's because the taxation law that enables us to put this before the voter it creates a different formula for allocating revenues to the city. It really focuses on the use tax component. And whereas the 1% is really focused on situs, everybody just knows that as storefront. So let me give you an example with vehicle. San Jose person comes to Milpitas, buys a vehicle from one of our 2 dealerships. We get the 1% Bradley Burns because the storefront, the dealership is in Milpitas. He's going to go home and register the vehicle in San Jose and use it in San Jose. We don't get the measure F. Differently, Milpitas person goes to San Jose, buys a car from a San Jose dealership. We will not get the 1% Bradley Burns because the storefront, the dealership, is not in Milpitas, but we will get the measure F because he will return to Milpitas, register, and use it in Milpitas. I say this point because this use nuance affects a couple of our categories in sales tax. Vehicle, business to business is a couple of examples. And the reason why I am emphasizing this is because it makes it difficult for us to estimate how much revenue we're going to get from this. It's not simply take 25% of the prior slide. For this purpose right now, we've only received about 7 months of revenue. We estimate about $6.3 million in Q1, which was last year. We received 1.3. We're estimating 6.3 this year and about a 2.9 to 2.7% forecast in the upcoming years. We'll continue to measure this. We're hoping it'll come in at about 6 million. We'll continue to report and try to understand what's happening in these different economic sectors. Next slide, please. So let's switch over now to TOT. As mentioned previously, it was 3rd ranking at $14.5 million. And so we're really watching this closely. I want to also say that through our ARPA Economic Development and Hotel Assistant, we're really reaching out to this important business sector of our community. As you can see there in this table, in May, June, July, after the second surge, we saw double-digit increases. We were very pleased by that. Then there was a bit of a leveling in August, September, October, November. So with optimism, we're still assuming a 5% increase for the balance of the year. That'll get us to 5.5%. We have great operators. We're positive about where we are geographically located in the Silicon Valley. We also have 2 new operators coming online, opening in this spring here. And so with that, we are assuming that we'll have an 8% increase next year as well. So we'll continue to monitor and report back, especially during our quarterly reports to the council. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the TOT trend. You could see there it was really increasing, and in 2019, this is at 14.5 million and COVID hit. This really illustrates how much capacity we have in our community when it pertains to this one economic sector. We have about 20 operators. It's a great portfolio of establishments, and we're really hopeful we're going to climb out of this, maybe not to pre-pandemic level, because business travel, which is predominantly our guests within our operators and our establishments here within the city, but we will have a lot of capacity to regain this revenue in upcoming years. Next slide, please. Switching over to the expenditure side, we are a service organization. So within the service organization, our personnel cost is driven based on our contracts. So the MOU terms and conditions are put into our forecast and reflected in the 10-year slide that I showed you. In addition, we provide services through contracts and third-party vendors and partnerships and suppliers. So the forecast also assumes scheduled increases or a modest CPI assumption. We have pension costs based on Bartel actuary reports. They reflect the unfunded liability payments in the current and upcoming years. In addition, it also reflects the 21% investment return and the new board decision, which reduced the discount rate down to 6.8% from 7%. The table to the right there illustrates what we did during COVID. As mentioned earlier, we had to defund $23.75 million as one of the strategies in combating the $30 million of loss. We have proposed in this budget restoring 9 of those positions, 6 through ARPA for public safety and 3 through general fund via non-safety position, leaving a balance of about 14.75. Next slide, please. Going on to the second slide of expenditures, as a service organization, and as many organizations, whether you're an individual, a business, or a government entity, you have to carry insurance. We belong to a very large pool of about 28 members, jurisdictions, and last year I reported that because of just the industry claims in the pool, our premiums increased for 70%. I petitioned the board and there was unanimous support saying that given the COVID pandemic budget crisis, we could not afford 70%. They unanimously approved a 3-year phase-in, which saved us $300,000 last year. This budget reflects the phase-in of year 2, meaning that in the general fund, it's about a $647,000 increase to all funds and about $448,000 to the general fund. I also want to share that Plan JPA is a very strategic plan, really comprised of a lot of smart people and experts amongst all these jurisdictions. So in response to this, one of their strategy is to join another pool called the Karma Risk Pool. The idea is to continue to leverage more jurisdictions to leverage our risk and leverage our buying power so we can stay insured in a more cost-effective manner. We'll see how this plays out. In March, the board will meet and we'll hear more about the budget development and how this is coming along. The other side of liability and property insurance is our workers' compensation insurance. Previously, the general fund carried all the costs of this insurance. So what we did was we allocated to the enterprise funds their fair share of those costs. And so that saved the general fund $105,000 to provide general fund services. I love this bullet point. Utilities, what a great example of an innovation that really hits a couple of huge hallmarks for us. Environmental sustainability and also saving money for the city, which translates to being able to use those dollars to provide more services. So as you may be aware, because the structures have been erected, the Senior Community Center has solar panels. So this project is already yielding savings in our utility bills. And for next year, we estimate $800,000 of savings. And over the course of 20 years, it's going to save an average of $1.2 million. So kudos to the Public Works Director and his staff and the Engineering Director for really coming together on this successful project. In other areas of utility, namely water and gas, we estimate a 6% increase in the budget and the forecast as well. To provide services, we need people, we need services, we need utility, we also need vehicle and large equipment. So the budget contemplates about $211,000 for that. Also want to share that we are innovative in our fleet management. We have a lease program, and also we actively auction our vehicle to make sure we're getting a good salvage value as we turn over the fleet. We have a stormwater system. That system needs to be funded given the situation we're in right now and prioritizing general fund services. We will defer supplementing that program until 2024 and then put in $500,000 starting in 2024 and thereafter. Next slide, please. So I also want to talk about what is not contemplated in the forecast out of the spirit of being transparent and talking about service levels. What is not in the forecast is the ability to fund all aging or new infrastructure, right? Like we want a performing arts or public safety buildings that need to be replaced, rehabbed, or new construction, and storm drain system as example. Operating costs for new expanded infrastructure. So as these new parks or expanded streets or new streets are being constructed, such infrastructure requires maintenance, whether it's landscaping, public works, slurry sealing, all that additional maintenance is not contemplated in this forecast. Also, PERS, while we're very timely in getting updates, even as of this month, I'll show you some actuarial reports as of this month, we can't anticipate what the CalPERS board will do in the future. So we want to qualify that the the future decisions by the Cal boards are not in the forecast. Last but not least, while we're going through the third surge, we do assume that COVID will continue to improve. We do not estimate any regression in our financial position or our reserves. Next slide, please. Great. So now let's spend some time on strategies, right? This is a short menu of some funding sources. And I just want to qualify it that as we're looking at these different funding sources, we don't lose sight of the fact that we want to continue to prioritize our service and be financially responsible. So let me walk us through what we have on this menu. We categorize them into what's called one-time sources and ongoing sources. One-time source means we spend it, there's no money the next year. Ongoing sources mean it's a stream of resources. And so we could maybe pay for ongoing repairs and services. So as you may recall, during the COVID period, we set aside $1.45 million into a category called future deficit reserve. We didn't use it in 20 and we don't contemplate using it in 21. So that's still on the table if we'd like to use it for one-time expenditures. FEMA reimbursement, I want to give credit to the city staff. We've been so diligent in documenting our expenses, and that at this point we have about $1.2 million of receipts and expenses and payroll timesheets. And of that, 6 projects have been submitted and is pending final review. We're pretty confident in that. And so we want to offer the idea that maybe taking $600,000 of FEMA reimbursement and using that as one-time funding. So that gives us about $2 million of one-time sources. Now, going to the ongoing list, I'll start with the simpler ones, which is gas tax fund. There's a variety of funding for street improvement and enhancement projects, RMRA, that's the Senate Bill 1, the local county measure B, and then also gas tax, to name just a few. Gas tax has more flexibility. We have general fund expenses that we could offload to the gas tax. And so that's one way to free up $100,000, maybe even $200,000 for other priority general fund expenses. Property tax, if we want to enhance the 4% assumption for high dollar transactions, we could probably add $100,000 to that assumption, maybe even 200, a modest amount to maybe buy us additional service. We also have the fee study coming up in this spring to look at new fees, review billings, overhead rates, maybe even cost allocation to the enterprise funds, and look at maybe fiscal strategies. And then ARPA, I'll touch on ARPA next, but then ARPA might be an opportunity for us to look at reallocating to other service areas in our budget development. I saved the best and the complex one last, which is looking at our general fund PERS balance. So in a few more slides, I'll talk about how Bartel Actuary, who are topic matter experts, recommend that we actually withdraw from our Pension 115 trust. Our recommendation tonight is really not to withdraw from that, but really to look at our general fund balance, which we obtained from prior year surplus, and then to take that $2.8 million and use it over 3 years, which will allow us a stream of about $900,000 for new services, repairs, and infrastructure needs. All right, so wanted to offer that up. Again, we want to be mindful of being fiscally disciplined, even with this menu as well. So next slide, I just want to show a couple of ARPA areas, just to remind folks what fabulous work the council and the staff has done. We have 25 amazing areas focused on 5 investment areas: community service, economic and infrastructure. Next slide, please. Public safety and technology. $16.7 million evenly distributed over this. Definitely want to emphasize the parks. A large amount of park funding is coming out of this. $4.3 million of that 16 million is going to our parks. 20 of our much needed parks will be repaired. What we're contemplating in this upcoming budget development is the idea of reallocating some of these funds. Maybe areas to enhance assistance to businesses, unhoused, beautification such as illegal dumping program, and or staffing to deliver some of the housing programs such as rent and mortgage relief. So I want to put that on the table as another strategy for us in this upcoming month as well. But again, sticking to the 5 investment areas and kind of the service deliveries that council has outlined for us in this table that I just illustrated. Next slide, please. All right. So please allow me to take a moment to unpack the pension strategy that I want to share with you. There are three main categories. One is the irrevocable pension Section 115 trust. That's a huge mouthful, so I'm just going to call it the 115 trust. Second, the general fund PERS balance, which is on our balance sheet. And third, the Bartel actuary, which is a body of experts, a firm that really focuses on actuarial studies of pension, in particular, our pension, our financial position, and our trust. So let's start with the trust, the 115 trust, first bullet point. Given the foresight of the county, the city, and the information that we've received over the year from CalPERS, we had the foresight to take $33.9 million and put it into an irrevocable trust. It enabled us to create an investment strategy that had moderate risk with a goal of 3 to 6% earnings. And we put that into place June 30th. So this year, we actually are beginning our first full year of investment. This money is doing what it needs to do, which is continue to work in the market and accrue this interest, this earning. We are not recommending to withdraw from this 115 trust tonight, which is, I want to make that very clear. What we're focused on is the second bullet point. On our balance sheet from last year's surplus, based on the operating fund surplus reserve waterfall, after we met our two reserves, namely the budget stabilization reserve and the contingency reserve, we then went to category number 3, which was to park some of the money into PERS, which is a very important priority. We have $2.8 million on the balance sheet. This is the money that we're proposing tonight to evaluate for the purpose of our budget development. And why do we do that? So much of what we do is grounded based on expert reports and guidance. So the actuaries did a study of our two plans. We have a safety plan, which includes safety for police and fire and miscellaneous. They incorporated the 21% investment return. They incorporated the 6.8% discount rate, and then determined, importantly, is that based on our financial position, the liability, we could actually start withdrawing even as of July 1. We don't want to recommend that. We actually want to recommend taking 50% of the amount because we want to acknowledge that we are still in a recovery and we want to be measured in our recommendation, right? 2 is that we're going to take the balance sheet amount and leave the 115 trust the way it is. And the idea is, as we all know, the stock market, whether it's debt or equity, is very volatile and dynamic. We want to leave the money in the trust for 4 more years so it has more time to accrue and deal and grow while we use the money on the balance sheet. The money in the balance sheet is probably likely sitting in LAIF, which is earning less than 1%. Next slide, please. So this is a summarization of what's on the balance sheet. I want you to please note the 2 green circles. We have 33.9 million in the trust and 2.8 million. So it's the 2.8 million I'm referring to. We're not touching any of the reserves down below, which is the contingency or the stabilization, which are really important. Okay, next slide. Let's talk a little bit about pension, because this is a bold proposal. I want to be transparent where the numbers come from and address some of the questions that I think I've heard over my 20 plus years of experience as a finance director. Bartel, you could see there where we got the report. It was done for us just this last week. First question I often hear is, what's our unfunded liability? In the miscellaneous plan, you could see there in fiscal 20, it was 84 million. There was 21% investment return. That number dropped to 58 million. That's a $25.7 million reduction. Still an unfunded liability of 58.5. Next slide, please. Safety, unfunded liability, it was 145 million. That investment return dropped it down to 112, a savings of 33 million. So the sum of the two, our unfunded liability is about $170 million. That's a large number, but it's not all due right away. Similar to other long-term debt, whether it's a mortgage or an unfunded pension liability, The borrower, which is the city, has an obligation to pay that over 30 years. Right? So I'm going to walk us through what that cash flow looks like, which is the foundation of this recommendation and the foundation of the actuary report. Next slide. Other question I often get is this concept of what is our funding status? Well, this shows that over time we are going to reach 100%. So this slide shows you the miscellaneous plan will reach 100% funding. And this next slide, if I may get some assistance, will show the safety will reach 100% as well. All right, next slide, please. So now let's dive into cash flow. So a good analogy might be with mortgages, you have adjustable mortgages and you have like a fixed mortgage. I kind of see this kind of as an adjustable. And you'll see there in this line chart kind of how our obligation adjusts, right? We have a peak in about 2030 in the safety plan. And similarly in the safety and miscellaneous plan, it's about 2030, 2032. What I want you to see is really how the green line remarkably declines and goes flat. That's basically our unfunded liability obligation, which is our cash obligation, right? So if you look at the next slide, please, safety has a similar correlation. There's going to be a slight peak, a remarkable reduction, and a flat UAL, because these big obligations get paid off. So now what I want to show you is this next slide. The Bartel report says in studying our 115 trust, we hold the cash and withdraw and correlate that with our cash obligation on this debt. Right, so the idea is not to park 33.9 million and just let it accrue for 20, 30 years. But the idea is to withdraw it consistent with our pension obligation. And that's the foundation of the recommendation, right? So I just wanted to tie this all back to give some confidence and illuminate some very important principles in this recommendation. So you'll see how this line kind of correlates to the other line. It sustains our 115th trust through 2042. And if we go to the next slide, the safety is the same correlating slide as well. And the Bartel assumes a 4% increase in terms of earnings, even though our policy has a goal between 3 and 6. So it's moderate. So I wanted to take a moment to unpack that for the council and the public, and certainly tonight, if there are any questions, happy to dive into more detail. Next slide. So let's move away from pension and the strategies for a moment and talk about policies pertaining to reserves. Reserves is super, super important, and they are really a pillar in terms of our financial sustainability. And during COVID in year 1 in 2020, we actually used $4 million of reserves. And so it really helped us to weather this crisis, right? What I want to show you here that's before you is a summary, 4 columns of 4 financial statements of our general fund balance. Accounting standard requires that we put them into these buckets called non-spendable, commitment, assigned, and unassigned. Most of us, including myself, we just focus on the unassigned, which is available, right? So the navy blue circle shows that in 2019, prior to the pandemic, we had $40 million. We went down to 34.4 because we used $4 million for the pandemic, and we put $2 million in affordable housing fund, because affordability in terms of housing is important, right? Just like the FM3 expert said, we put $2 million in the affordable housing fund. Then we had a surplus last year due to a number of strategies, primarily due to one-time revenue. So the unassigned savings has gone back up to $38 million. So you could see there we met our reserve targets for contingency and budget stabilization. Once we meet those reserves, the waterfall in terms of how we allocate the surplus then bumps it up to the PERS line, the $2.8 million up above. Based on the information that we receive from Bartel, it doesn't appear that putting that money there makes a lot of sense today, or if based on what we know. We'd like to offer the idea of maybe refining our policy so that way it's more dynamic and perhaps reflective of maybe actuarial reports or other needs that will enable us maybe to put money into technology replacement, facilities, such as the next two lines below there, or even other priority areas that come out of the budget development process. So no action tonight. We just want to offer that idea that policies is super important. We're going to fund those reserves first, but really, what do we do after that? And do we want to fine tune that a little bit more? So next slide, I want to show you what we did, right? Reserves, we always want to benchmark ourselves because we're data driven and we want to make sure that we are implementing best practices. So we took the audited financial statements from jurisdictions in our geographical area, and it shows, like the city manager said, we are second amongst quite a few reputable and very well-established local jurisdictions here in the city. And that also kind of grounds us in how we look at our reserve policy, which is what I just spoke about 5 minutes ago. At this point, I conclude my budget presentation and I'll hand it off to the Assistant City Manager, and Ashwini Kantak.
Thank you, Lauren. And Mayor, I just want to make sure you're okay to continue with the presentation, or would you like to stop for questions?
I'm loving it. I'm loving the presentation. Really, Lauren, great job. You're really on a roll there. You have really a strong command of our finances. So we can carry on. Ashwini, please.
Okay, thank you. So good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council members. Ashwini Kantak, Assistant City Manager. So as we kick off the fiscal year 22-23 budget planning process, we're really excited to be here to talk about key city programs, projects, and services. Deputy City Manager Walter Rossman and I will share some key accomplishments to date this fiscal year, as well as a few key work plan items for the remainder of the fiscal year. And in the interest of time, we will just touch upon a few highlights. The slides cover additional items, and even then, I just like to note that these are a fraction of the overall department work plans. So I would like to take a moment to acknowledge all of the department heads and their teams, and the city attorney and his team for continuing to do such a great job for our city and community. And of course, the city council always provides great leadership and guidance. We get input from our community and excellent work by our staff. We believe with all of this, we have been able to provide high quality services and programs to our residents and businesses in the past 6 months. And this is despite all of the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So for members of the public, this slide provides information about city service areas, or CSAs, as I'll refer to them. Departments or portions thereof are grouped by CSAs to enable better collaboration and coordination between departments. And the goal really is to provide seamless services to our community. There are 4 CSAs, as you can see on the slide. It's community development, community services, and sustainable infrastructure, public safety, and leadership and strategic support. And the accomplishments and work plan items will be covered by department within each city service area. Next slide, please. So we'll start out with community development. This CSA comprises of building safety and housing, economic development, land development and traffic sections of engineering, fire prevention section of the fire department, as well as planning. And all of these departments work really closely to provide excellent services to our development community, as well as Milpitas residents and businesses as a whole. Next slide, please. So building safety and housing department continue to see a really high volume of permit activity despite the pandemic, with over 2,000 permits issued and over 8,000 inspections conducted in just the first 6 months of this fiscal year. One key project milestone was receiving council direction on city-owned properties on South Main Street. This was a really complex project which required significant stakeholder outreach and analysis to bring forward the best option for the city. And this was done in close coordination with the city attorney's office. Continuing on the housing front, we have continued a successful partnership with the county as well as nonprofits to deliver services to the unhoused. Council also approved amendments to the affordable housing ordinance, which further strengthens the city's affordable housing policies. Next slide, please. Our Office of Economic Development has continued to do an amazing job assisting businesses that are challenged by the pandemic, and this is while continuing to implement the council-approved economic development strategy, attracting and retaining businesses, and implementing a variety of economic vitality programs that are funded by the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. So a key project for this Office of Economic Development included completing phase 1 of a fiscal benefits of employment land study. And this is really to preserve and protect commercial property located in the Innovation District within what will be the new Milpitas Metro specific plan area. This is key to diversifying the city's future tax base and attracting high quality jobs to Milpitas. We also hosted the 5th annual Manufacturing Day. This was done in partnership with our Economic Development and Trade Commission, the Milpitas Unified School District, advanced manufacturing businesses, and we were able to have 250 participants that attended this. Next slide, please. So engineering, you'll see them appear in a couple of CSAs. So the land development and part of traffic sections are in this CSA, and they successfully completed the annual and 5-year FEMA community rating system audits and recertification. This is really important because what it does is it allows Milpitas to remain at a rating, so a class 7 rating, which actually translates into a 15% reduction in flood insurance premiums for our community. As with other departments in this CSA, providing timely review services remains a high priority, with most initial permit and plan reviews done within 30 days and second reviews within 15 days. Staff also continued updating the city's GIS system so as to accurately reflect changes in the city's infrastructure. Again, something that's really key for both the private sector as well as for city projects. Next slide, please. Fire prevention in the past 6 months implemented an online electronic plan review submittal system, as well as associated billing for fire construction permits. They continue to provide timely inspection services with a minimum 95% of the inspections scheduled and conducted by staff within 5 days of the initial request. Next slide, please. The planning department, with extensive community engagement and council direction, was able to complete the draft Milpitas Metro specific plan. We anticipate final adoption later in the summer of this year. There were 2 noteworthy projects. These were development of tools to simplify the planning process. They included the development review handbook and an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU toolkit, both of which were recently presented to council. They were also really successful in receiving grants. So they applied for and received over $2 million in grants, a $500,000 regional planning grant from MTC and ABAG to help cover costs of the Midtown Milpitas specific plan update, which will be the new Gateway Main Street plan, and also a $1.85 million Measure B grant from VTA to implement the Milpitas on-demand microtransit pilot program. Next slide, please. So those were just some of the few accomplishments, and I'll now cover some of the key work plan items in this CSA for the remainder of this fiscal year. As you will see, some of these items are pretty large, significant efforts, and they'll be continued into the next fiscal year and potentially even the following one. So for building safety and housing, the department will be collaborating with Silicon Valley Clean Energy and develop and enhance REACH codes. And again, this is with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. A high priority for the council has been ADUs, incentivizing those, and council has approved ARPA funding to make this happen. So staff will be implementing the Safe ADU legalization program, as well as a ADU permit incentive program. They will also be implementing the rent and mortgage relief program, which is also funded by ARPA. Next slide, please. The Office of Economic Development will continue to be really busy implementing key ARPA programs. There's a lot of money that council has approved towards economic vitality, and so they will be working on implementing the Small Business Assistance Grant Program, looking at about 750,000 in grants for this remainder of this fiscal year, deploying 200,000 in grants to assist our Milpitas hotels that were really impacted by the pandemic, initiating programs on workforce development, and then also helping the Chamber of Commerce with a grant based on certain performance metrics. They will also be completing phase 2 of the Innovation District study that I talked about. And this one will actually focus on some case studies, look at governance structure, financing structure, and then basically recommend some policies and an action plan. Next slide, please. Engineering, again, will continue to work efficiently to complete plan reviews and permitting for work within the city's right-of-way to help streamline process and help private development. They will continue the important work that I talked about related to reducing the dangers of flood hazards through participation in FEMA programs, as well as stormwater improvement projects. And then another key priority for the city, they'll continue working with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, or BACMed, as well as City of San Jose, to ensure completion of the regional long-term odor study. We hope to bring this forward for council consideration later in the fiscal year. Next slide, please. Fire prevention has some key positions that are either currently vacant or anticipated to be vacant because of upcoming retirements. And so one of the key work plan items over the next 6 months will be to complete recruitment as well as training to fill the Deputy Chief Fire Marshal, Assistant Chief Fire Marshal position, as well as a fire inspector, with the goal of ensuring a seamless transition of services to the community. They will continue enhancements to their database in order to better track and manage performance measures, and will also be looking to see how to maximize revenue in an effort to become more cost neutral. A key project on their work plan is to also implement an on-demand mobile fueling operational fire permit program. Next slide, please. The planning department has many key milestones for long-range planning and programs through the rest of the fiscal year. They will be completing the Milpitas Metro Specific Plan and EIR that I talked about earlier and bringing it forward for council consideration in summer. They'll also be implementing some great online tools that will improve customer experience during the planning permit process. And as I mentioned earlier, we received a $1.2 million grant for the Milpitas On-Demand Microtransit Pilot Program. So we expect to bring this for council approval shortly and are looking forward to implementing this innovative program by the end of this fiscal year. We also had great success with our temporary outdoor dining program during the pandemic, and we're looking forward to implement a permanent program to allow restaurants the opportunity to continue to offer outdoor dining. You could go to the next slide. So leadership and strategic support services. This CSA comprises of the city clerk's office, the city manager's office, finance, human resources, and information technology. These departments provide support to the council and the entire organization on governance, policy, and administrative functions. The city attorney and his team are also a key component of this CSA, as they provide legal support across the organization and are really critical to many of the accomplishments being shared with you today. So we'll start out with the city clerk's office. In the past 6 months, the city clerk's office worked closely with the city attorney to bring forward an amendment to the open government ordinance for council consideration. And in addition to supporting council meetings, the clerk's office also supported the mayor and council on commission recruitments, an appointment process for our 12 commissions, 2 task forces, as well as 1 oversight committee. Next slide, please. The city manager's office, we were very pleased to have council approval of a comprehensive $16.7 million ARPA investment plan that provides relief to Milpitas residents and businesses, as well as funding for city services and infrastructure. This was a big undertaking, and we were really pleased to bring something forward for council consideration through the past several months. And as Director Lai talked about earlier, we continue to kind of look at changing needs, and we'll continue to bring forward recommendations for council consideration on this plan. We also led the Emergency Operations Center and provided direction related to the ever-evolving pandemic situation, as well as public health orders. Our office, of course, led several interdepartmental efforts to address important things like affordable housing, unhoused services, legislation, Main Street revitalization, and several programs and long-range plans. And community engagement and employee engagement remains a high priority. So we did that, continue to increase that through both digital and traditional channels. As you saw, Charmaine talked about our social media engagement, as well as the biweekly Milpitas Matters, the Connected that goes to all the residents, as well as we did a revamping of our employee intranet site to better connect them to resources as well as each other. Next slide, please. So the finance department obviously plays a very key role in the implementation of ARPA programs. And so in the past 6 months, they worked with our consultant, AG Witt, and developed ARPA procedures and procurement guidance to support implementation of this investment plan. They implemented the Measure F Oversight Committee recruitment and supported the meetings of the committee. As you heard from Director Lai, they also implemented Pension 115 trust investments, as well as conducted quarterly reporting. And then one key project in the past 6 months was working with departments on FEMA reimbursement related to COVID-19. So they processed $1.2 million of FEMA COVID-related cost claims. And as you heard earlier, we are hopeful to have $600,000 coming our way soon. It's pending final review. Next slide, please. Human Resources Department implemented an automated onboarding process to enable a smooth and more consistent onboarding experience for new employees. Milpitas was among the first cities in the county to successfully implement a citywide COVID-19 vaccine mandate. This required negotiations with labor groups, tracking employee vaccine records, and discussion with employees seeking exemptions. And this effort was completed in close collaboration with the city attorney's team. Human Resources also collaborated with hiring managers to successfully fill 63 positions, entered into 24 side letters of agreement, and also updated several city policies. Next slide, please. Information technology supported the implementation of new systems to improve delivery of critical public safety services, including a new police records management system, as well as an electronic citation system. Cybersecurity is ever a high priority, and so they implemented several measures to strengthen this, including a network threat detection system, a user training program, and also initiated the rollout of a multi-factor user authentication to strengthen cybersecurity measures. They also developed a streamlined ARPA web portal. This was all done in-house, and this allows us to manage applicants and to also ensure transparency on all Milpitas ARPA programs. And then with the continued shift to virtual and hybrid public meetings, IT provided technical support for almost 80 meetings. And this allowed, of course, enhanced public participation through a time where we really could not meet in person. Next slide, please. So I'll shift over to some key work plan items. 2 key projects for the city clerk's office for the remainder of this fiscal year include an update to our very outdated records retention schedule, as well as implementing an automated public records request system to allow us to more efficiently handle all of the requests we receive. Next slide. The city manager's office, again, we will continue to support the council in key policy decisions, prioritizations, budget process, and then, of course, provide guidance and direction to departments on key programs, initiatives, as well as city council prioritized work plan items, also in seeking grants. At least for the foreseeable future, we believe we will need to continue to lead the Emergency Operations Center and guide the COVID response effort. And in an ongoing effort to improve communications, we'll continue to expand both employee and community engagement platforms, including some improvements to the city's website, intranet, and social media platforms. Next slide, please. And so over the next 5 months, finance in close collaboration with the city manager's office will solicit community council and staff input to develop the 22-23 balanced budget and refine the 10-year forecast. Of course, they'll continue to support ARPA programs, including things like the ADU program, economic vitality programs, and many infrastructure and other community service programs. And finance also plays a key role in providing assistance on major projects such as the transit area specific plan and the future Milpitas Metro plan, the moderate income housing proposal that council has heard about before and will be coming to you next month, as well as our energy sustainability capital projects, labor negotiations, solid waste franchise discussions, as well as a Milpitas water rate study. Next slide, please. Human resources will continue implementation of our software for employee. We have implemented certain modules and we'll continue to build upon that. So the work for the rest of this fiscal year will be really focused on the performance evaluation process using the NeoGov software to do that. They will be issuing a RFP for a new human resources information system. As you know, that was funded by ARPA. And then another key area of work is employee engagement. They will be coordinating an employee engagement survey. And that'll determine levels of employee engagement as well as strategies to improve this. And they will be working with labor groups and departments to update and modernize personnel rules. And then this is the last slide for me. And information technology, again, emphasis on cybersecurity. So IT will continue to implement additional measures to strengthen these systems, as well as increase awareness among our employees. A key project will be to implement City Hall technology improvements to better support the hybrid council meetings, as well as our hybrid work environment. And so the work will include an assessment of the council chamber technology system and looking at improving that, as well as upgrading our conference room technology systems. And then with the goal of improving functionality and efficiency across the organization, IT will be implementing additional enhancements to our Office 365, such as audio conferencing, as well as mobile device management. And with that, I will hand it off to Deputy City Manager Walter Rossman.
Thank you, Shalini, and good evening, Mayor and City Council members, and I appreciate you and letting us indulge you in the accomplishments and the work plan items, which we are honored to present here to you for 2 CSAs. First one is the Community Services and Sustainable Infrastructure CSA. This includes Public Works, Engineering, the other half, which Shalini talked about, as well as private Recreation Community Services. Next slide, please. Looking at engineering, we have implemented the traffic calming program, which was approved by council, and the mobile speed feedback equipment. It is well liked by the community. We're getting requests to measure the speed at certain residential neighborhoods and other streets. It has been quite a successful program for us. The council approved the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update in last month in December, and we also initiated the Candles Park Phase 1 construction project. Next slide, please. Public Works has implemented and the council approved energy and water savings program, which just recently in early January completed the LED switch out of all street lights. We still have some work to do with our street lights, which is going to come forward, which is going to be focused on next few weeks and months. We also, per council approval, implemented the water conservation measures in order to respond to the drought. We've been quite successful in meeting the goal of the measures, and we continue working with our residents, educating them of the various programs which we have in order to continue achieving the water conservation goals. The council also approved and we implemented the dumpster days and pilot voucher program for solid waste, and we'll report out about this program as part of the budget process in the May study session. Next slide, please. Recreation Community Services really has been a pivoting department in switching back and forth with providing recreation activities for our residents, going to response services for COVID, testing sites, vaccination clinics, mental health town halls. It's been quite amazing. A very mighty team, a small team to help out the community and respond to their needs. We also implemented the first full cycle of council-approved Milpitas assistance programs, MAP. We started using ARPA dollars as well for your water utility subsidies. And lastly, the pivoting which we did with recreation programs would provide service virtually, outdoors, in person, socially distanced, and drive-throughs. So we tried to modify our service delivery model as much as we could in response to COVID-19 and the pandemic. Next slide, please. Engineering, talking about key work plan items next. So we have Station 2 coming up to be finished up. It's the fire station number 2, McCandless Park, and the annual street resurfacing program. Then we're also going to East Valley Water with flood control projects to Calera, Lower Penitentiary, and various creeks. And lastly, we initiated with the Caltrans project approval and environmental phase for the widening of the Calaveras Bridge, working together with the VTA. The council just recently approved the funding agreement with VTA in December of last year. Slide, please. So you will see us forthcoming with the ULT master plan, and this is water, sewer, and storm, and the final financial component of this is what CEQA. We plan to bring this to you in May of this year. We also plan to bring to you the climate action plan to a study session either in February and March. Lots of work has been completed there, and it's time for council input and final outreach to stakeholders and to the public. And here's the second part of the community order program, which we plan. The latest we understand from the Bay Area Quality Management District, they will bring their study to you in April. We're hoping to finalize our own study by February of this year, and then we'll report that to council. Next slide, please. Recreation, we now that we're pivoting away from Holiday Magic, we're going to the ARPA funding programs regarding mental health services, childcare, community events, and Main Street revitalization. Council approved the mural program, and we are excited to work on that as well. And we continue to do the community events. Upcoming is the Lunar New Year on February 1st, flag raisings, and support community revitalization efforts on Main Street as needed. Next slide, please. Public safety is your two big departments, which Lauren, Director Lai talked about, police and fire, and we have the chiefs in the audience as well. Next slide, please. Police implemented the wellness application program specifically tailored to the police, so it's sworn officers and the police department employees. They held in the last 6 months 34 virtual, in-person community engagement events. They also implemented a traffic citation diversion program for juveniles and seniors in order to not result in having a fine for juveniles and seniors, but education in order to allow them to continue driving the cars and learn to be part of the traffic. Next slide, please. Similar as in police, fire is concerned about the wellness of its employees, and they complete the annual physicals for all operation division personnel. We also worked on continued per council direction of the emergency operations plan to now pivot to annexes and other areas which we need to work on, such as the continuity of operations plan, which is a part of the emergency operations plan, which council approves about the last fiscal year. And then we had 4 in support of our statewide wildfire response. We had 4 deployments for fire staff to support CAL FIRE and other cities and counties in the state in response to wildfires, which we had last year. Next slide, please. Police, in conjunction, you heard this on the information technology side that Shwini talked about. They implemented a records management system. We also ensure compliance with the Racial Identity Profiling Act per federal law. And we are trying to be really, really creative with dispatcher recruitment. Dispatcher is an area which is short-staffed across the entire county. We're doing this for in-person events, virtual events, digital recruitment campaigns. So we're really trying to bring dispatchers to our city, which can stay for hopefully a long time. we look at the work plan items, deployment of the ambulance is scheduled to happen next summer, or this coming summer, going into potentially fall. We'll see how we can line it all up. In order to deploy the ambulance, we have to go through the fire academy, which is next item below. Fire academy is going to start next month. We're going to have 8 people in the fire academy, and hopefully they all make it, all the recruits, so we can fill our vacant positions. And as I mentioned, the emergency operations plan, which council approved, has many components. Next thing we're going to do is the training plan for our staff. It's the 5-year plan in order to be for key positions, which are part of the emergency operations center, and continue to develop additional annexes in response to certain hazards. Next slide, please. Next one, I'm going to turn it over to Ashwini regarding council referrals, which we have when we require potential funding and resources.
Thank you, Walter. So the next few slides will cover prior council referrals that were made for the most part since the adoption of the current fiscal year 2021 budget. These referrals were approved through the prioritization process or at other council meetings. However, the approvals were just to enable staff to spend more than 4 hours of staff time on these items. The costs and resources to actually complete these items were to be discussed during the annual budget process. So we've listed the items along with estimated costs and resources, if available, and have also noted the items which will be discussed as part of the CIP study session on February 8th. I'll walk through each of them briefly, and we have staff available to provide detailed information as needed. And as noted by the city manager earlier, staffing capacity will be a very important consideration as we develop the draft budget. We are in listening mode right now, seeking feedback from the council, community, and departments. As you saw in Finance Director Lai's presentation, the forecast does not really allow us a lot of room to fund additional resources and services. And so any additional feedback you may have on these referrals would be much appreciated. If we could go to the next slide, please. And so again, these are items, what you see here is the item name, the date that it was approved for the 4 or more hours of staff time, not necessarily approved for funding or resources. We've noted what the additional funding or resources needed is. You will see that not all of the prioritized items are on here because they can be accommodated with existing resources and funding, or they were already planned with some funding source. So this is the additional funding that will be needed. And then we've also noted some potential funding sources. And so we start off with the first item, building height limits near the hillside. We've noted 120,000 in supplemental staffing. This is if this item were to move forward ahead of the comprehensive zoning update that was covered in the work plan items. So if this moves forward separately, it will require additional supplemental staffing. Next is the Community Museum and Park on Main Street. This was discussed almost a year ago, in February of 2021. And the direction was to include this as well as some of the other Main Street items in the specific planning process. However, we just wanted to note that this is not an item that has been funded. The next 2 items are related to changes, potential ballot measures. So there was an item related to changing term limits for both the mayor and council members, and then one about potentially changing from a directly elected mayor to a rotational at-large position. And these were both, again, approved by council to spend some time on March 16th of 2021. We will be bringing forward some information for council consideration in the next 2 months. Just wanted to note that right now we're not contemplating funding these. We had noted about 70,000 per ballot measure. It may require multiple ballot measures for these items. And those costs include the actual cost of placing it on the ballot, but also associated staffing costs and any information dissemination that has to happen. And then the next item 5, this is an item that was just prioritized by council on January 11th. And this would come from the Public Art Fund, but we're just noting that that would require some additional dollars to be budgeted. We could incorporate that as part of the budget development. Next slide, please. The next one you see here, the murals for the pillars on Main Street, again, could come from the Public Art Fund. We had noted that it would be about $180,000, but if the city's mural program or citywide was suspended for 2 years and the decision was to focus efforts on this project, then that funding, the additional funding needed would be reduced to $80,000. The outdoor music ordinance, this is similar to the first item on the heights near the hillside. If it's incorporated into the overall work related to the zoning ordinance update, there shouldn't be any additional funding required. But if we wanted to accelerate it, we would need to bring on some supplemental staffing, and we're estimating that at about $20,000. And that could come from Community Planning Fund or General Fund. Park Champions, this was another item that was just approved recently, January 11th, to move forward. There's about $17,000 associated with that. The Railroad Quiet Zone, this was discussed in August of 2021. We had noted the dollars needed for an initial study, about $300,000. And then quite a significant amount of funding that would be needed to make the actual improvements at all 10 crossings. And this has been identified on as part of the unfunded projects list in the proposed CIP, which you will be again discussing on February 8th. Next slide, please. Number 10 is a recently approved item, the Roller Skate Summer Program, and some of the funding would be needed for 22-23 and some for 23-24. We have a range right here estimated from anywhere from $150,000 to about $190,000. This would largely need to come from the general fund with maybe some offset by recreation fees. The next item is the Rose Garden, and this will be discussed as part of the CIP. But again, the funding, if this is something that the council would like to move forward with, we will need to identify funding of about $300,000 one time, and then for ongoing maintenance, about $10,000. And this could potentially come from the Midtown Park Fund or the general fund. Signs in key areas of the city to welcome people to Milpitas. This could be incorporated into the CIP. If that's council direction, we would need to identify the funding. And again, this could come from a combination of general fund impact fees and grants, depending on the locations. The sliding scale permit program for seniors, we had noted about $20,000 for the first year. And then we would have to take a look at the ongoing costs, and this would come from the general fund. And this would be combined with the MAP Milpitas Assistance Program, as we had discussed earlier for low-income residents. Next slide, please. Now, these are referrals that were discussed outside of the prioritization process at various council meetings. So item 14 is the parks, having parks maintenance done at the highest level, level A. This was discussed during the Parks Master Plan discussion. And $1.2 million is what we're estimating for enhancing the maintenance in the 26 parks that are currently maintained by the contractor, as well as $300,000 for the 10 parks that are maintained by city staff. And this could come from either the general fund or CFD, depending on the location. Streetscape maintenance, again, going to level 1, I estimated about $320,000. And this would come based on locations, either from the general fund, the lighting and landscape maintenance districts, or the community facilities districts. Pickleball pilot project, this will be discussed during the CIP study session as directed by council recently. And so we will be bringing that discussion forward on February 8th. And then police substation, this was brought up as a potential use on city-owned parcel 2 on South Main Street. And again, this could be discussed during the CIP study session, but right now there's no funding contemplated in the proposed CIP. This could be eligible for impact fee funding. And I think that that concludes the presentation, Mayor. If we can go to the next slide. So we're open for council feedback and questions. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Ashwini. Great job. And before you, thank you, Walter. Great job as well, following up after the finance director. I just want to give praise. Take a moment here. I want to give praise to our city manager's office. The CSAs were presented department by department, and it was very digestible this year. And so I do want to recognize that. I know that's a little different than years past, and it's a lot more it's a lot better to understand, at least for me. So I do want to say that. Thank you so much for the presentation. Just some initial thoughts is we are going through a pandemic and all the negative impacts that a pandemic brings to a city government. And I just want to applaud our organization all the way around for stepping up to the plate and stepping up to the challenge. This is not a city where the pandemic hit us and we let go of all the other community concerns. I do want to give kudos to my colleagues on the council for not, and really everybody for really addressing the pandemic, working on the recovery, but also staying current with the needs of our community. And I certainly think that shows through every department director and your whole team in your departments. I see all your names, very long list, but everybody, thank you. And I'm just proud. We can't sit here and say that we're not proud of the work that was being done. I know it's only the mid-year right now, but I'll take this time to give praise. No one can say that they're not proud of what our city's done, really in going above and beyond. And you can even see it with the council referrals. I don't think anybody's hit the brakes yet, although we have slowed down the vehicle, figuratively speaking, respectfully. So just a delight to receive all this information and to take a moment to reflect, but also to look forward to what we have here ahead of us in these 6 months. The council referrals are encouraging. Relative expenses aren't alarming. Perhaps maybe the quiet zone, that's about it, but there can be some more research done there. And so, yeah, I look forward to listening to my colleagues' comments, but first let's go to public comment. All right, let's get public comment out the way with the virtual raised hand. We have Voltaire Montemayor.
Hello, everybody. Kind of late, but I had almost all the data I heard. I was viewing clearly. The mayor said, "We are proud of you guys. I am impressed. I admire you. More power to you guys." Yes, that's all I can see. Thank you. Yeah, very nice presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Montemayor, a longtime resident, valued commissioner. Next up, we have Allison McDonald. Welcome. And we'll get your microphone unmuted. We got the clock ready to go.
Oh, I thought I was unmuted already. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to staff for the fabulous presentation. I had a couple of points I wanted to make. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like there was some proposal in the initial presentation to defer stormwater improvements, and I would strongly discourage that, given that with the climate crisis that's on our doorstep and rising water levels and possibly increased storm events, that we need to make sure that our stormwater improvements are being taken care of and not deferred. Regarding the ARPA funding, there is a plan for rent and mortgage assistance, and I would encourage the council to take a close look at that, have staff come back with a report and recommendations based on current information about state and federal programs and the use of the funds that we're seeing through our rent relief programs that we have locally as well. And then my main point is about services for the unhoused. Last year, money was spent on assessing our unhoused population so that they could be on the community queue with the county. And now we've got a lot of those assessments done, but I'm remembering that last winter when that was being considered, there was also a proposal for services and that was deferred until after the assessments could be done. And I encourage that to be paid for. We need housing, we need services beyond just showers. We need people to be assisted with their housing and having slots that include wraparound services. So if you need to know where you can get that money, rather than growing the budget for the police, which is already the largest portion of the budget, and they're almost all of their positions are filled currently, I would recommend taking some of that funding and putting it towards helping getting people, our most vulnerable people, taken care of so they're not littering the streets and dying on the streets. Thank you.
Next up, we have Stephen Ballsbaugh. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We'll get your microphone unmuted here. Go ahead and get your cursor on your microphone. Go ahead and left click it, and we'll get your microphone unmuted from your location. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and City Council. It was a very informative presentation. I have my own perception of what a pilot project means from my own experience, but from the city's perspective, I say used frequently. Could someone please define the definition of a pilot project from the city's perspective? That's it. Thank you.
You got it. Okay, I see no further virtual raised hands. Perhaps our city manager can answer that question for our valued resident briefly.
Sure, I'll take a shot at it. I think we might have even defined it. I'm not sure if our assistant city manager recalls defining it in a slide, maybe in previous meetings. But when the council asks for a pilot program or staff presents that, that's a program in a defined duration, potentially as an example, 6 month duration, potentially be a year duration. We have a couple recent ones where we talked about a pickleball program where we will set that up, we will arrange for it, accommodate and promote the program for 6 months. And at the end of that time, or the end of whatever time we decide in that pilot, we will return back to the council and report the findings, the successes, the areas that we can improve upon, if the council decides to move forward or not. In many cases, this council does decide to move forward with the program based on staff's recommendations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's public comment. Thank you, everybody. Let's see, one more virtual raised hand. Let's see, scroll up. We have our Assistant City Manager, Ashwini Kantak.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Tran. We just noticed that there were a couple of things that were off on the budget calendar slide. So for the public, we just want to make sure we put up the corrected slide. If we can have that brought up, please. We just want to make sure, oh, this doesn't have the May 10th one either. Okay, apologies, Mayor. We'll bring it back up maybe after council discussion. We just want to make sure that the community who's watching has the right slides, and we'll make sure the slide deck is corrected as well. The May 10th budget study session date is not included in this slide, so we want to make sure it's there for the record. Thank
You
you.
know, that May 10th is my birthday, so if it's not there, if it's not there, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
But if it
Okay,
is there,
thank
I'm there. There's nothing
Thank
more
you.
important. Yeah, there's nothing more important to me than this city. So, okay, great. Duly noted for our public members of the community. There is a May 10th date that will be a part of this budgeting season, if I may say. This is the funnest time in City Hall, if you ask me, where we can make all sorts of decisions for our great residents in all neighborhoods across the land of cornfields here. And when we're done, we get to celebrate 4th of July and a summer recess, which is common in government. And so I just know it's going to be a really delightful process from now until the summertime. Looking forward to it. And as we've seen from our assistant city manager, the schedule. And so mark your calendars, folks. Okay, great. That was public comment. We'll bring the discussion back up to the council. I know tonight we're mostly receiving information. And let me check in with our city manager. What kind of feedback would you like this evening from our great council?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So we did present to you a number of, well, a lot of information. I think some of the areas our finance director, Lauren Lai, had asked for some potential discussion on how funds could be used. We also, I think as our assistant city manager, Shwini Contact, had mentioned the council priorities. If there's comments or emphasis in those areas, anything you can provide based on the information we provided you to allow staff to go back and refine the budget is extremely appreciated tonight.
Okay, great, fantastic. That's quite helpful. I won't take too much of a deep dive tonight. I know that's why we have a series of public meetings to kind of gradually go through the decisions. I really appreciate our finance director, Lauren Lai's financial strategy. I think that was a key word that Lauren used during the presentation. And that's really the most important thing in City Hall, how we're going to strategize the dollars that we have and to ensure that we're covering and funding all the areas that are important to our residents, our city's mission, council values, core services, all the above. So I support our finance director's recommendation tonight on how we're moving forward with our financial strategy. I think after careful thought and even meeting with our finance director, Lauren Lai, I think last week it was, I am more assured that we're doing all our best to ensure that the funding is there here in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's my recommendation to the council as well, to support the financial strategy that we've seen tonight. Next thought I have is I just want to give kudos to public safety. Seeing the Measure R dollars, seeing those dollars become great value to our residents. Our police and fire are really doing an impressive service to our community. Just understanding the community I've been in for a long time. I know that the challenges are much different than many years past, and our police department, our fire department have responded with the times, whereas other cities in the region do not enforce laws. It's unfortunate. Some of those public safety risks go into other communities, and I think that I can honestly say I've seen crimes and suspects and criminals from other places come into Milpitas, and our public safety departments, police have been ready to protect our residents. Law enforcement's been around for 170 years approximately here in the Bay Area. And I'm proud to say that we have our Milpitas Police Department as a part of the law enforcement establishment and history policing here in the Bay Area. I feel very safe. I guess last note I have, because I could talk all night. The last note I have is I think with any spending increases that we have, I want to recommend to the council, we really look into public works. It's no secret that there have been challenges to the front facing of our city, whether it's streetscaping or landscaping, street lights. Right now, there are over 150 street lights in Milpitas that are not in operation. And I don't have to go too far from my home to walk through a street in the dark without the light on. We really need to invest into ensuring that our residents' quality of life is there. Because right now it's a great concern. And I know throwing money is not the answer, but I think through financial strategy, we can get the outcomes that we want here in the short term. It's just challenging times, even with code enforcement. Perhaps we can invest more into code enforcement. I think we can really use policy and those sorts of things to clean up our town. All it takes is eyes on the ground to report nuisances and vandalism. If we can clean up this town in these next 12 months or short, 18 months, whatever it is, can't go out too long. If we can clean up our town to get it looking like we're accustomed to living here for so long, and to meet the expectations of our residents, many longtime residents, I really want to recommend to the council that you think about it tonight. Perhaps we'll give consensus feedback to our city manager, and that we can finally get this resolved. The data will show there's a lot of issues right now with the front facing of our community, and there's too many constituent reports of things not tended to for lengths that can be measured in months. And I'm afraid that if we don't resolve these issues out there, some of these complaints will extend to be a measure of years, and we certainly can't have that. In the beginning of the presentation tonight, it showed that our budget is down $30 million compared to pre-COVID. And I know a number of us were here pre-COVID, and I remember when the budget was $30 million down from its peak. And so I'm used to the budget being how it is right now. We made do with what we had then, and we provided the core services that the residents expected. And I know that even with pandemic revenues and pandemic general funds, that's not an excuse or not anything that can stop us from meeting the quality of life for our residents. So that's really the theme of, I think, 2022. From what I heard with the vice mayor and talking to Vice Mayor Montano, we got to be a champion for our neighborhoods, and we have to focus on our neighborhoods right here and now. So it's going to be a great process. Again, I really look forward to it because this is our opportunity to do great for our residents, and just strive for excellence. Next up, we have Councilmember Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for the time. Definitely first want to thank staff for an amazing presentation, and most importantly, thank you all for the work that you have done in order to come to the accomplishments and to rising up through this pandemic as we continue to see some of the shortfalls, not only in our city, but in our region. I definitely think we could champion our city smarter, more innovatively, and you guys have definitely came up and risen to the occasion. And although we continue to face some challenges, we are still doing this as best as we could. Personally, I am extremely concerned about staff capacity, and we are not in the same place that we were at a couple of years ago. So I will kindly disagree with the mayor. We are in a very different situation, folks. We are in a situation where we have a pandemic. A pandemic means that people are getting sick. That includes our staff. Without staff, we can't do anything. So I want to be very clear to our community that although we want to be champions for our community, at this point, we need to show compassion and empathy to those who are carrying us, which is our staff. Without no staff, there is no services. There is no public works. There is no weed maintenance. There is no light reparations. There is no park and recs. There is none of that. And with all due respect, Mayor, we cannot forget that, and you're forgetting it. So I'm going to kindly remind you that we are not in a place of spending money. And we have a responsibility to our taxpayers, like my mom says, to expand that dollar. And that's what I hope to do in the next year. I hope that we are able to expend every dollar, tax dollar, like if it was our own. Let's maximize it by asking what grants are out there. Personally, I have said it before. I think we need to focus on primary services. For me, parks is a priority as well as safety. So thank you so much, staff, for moving in that direction. We want to make sure that those staffing levels, we continue to stay afloat with our police department, that we continue to use innovation to do the apprehension just as much as we've been doing it, and collaborate with other law enforcement agencies, which we have been doing amazingly. And that's thanks to our chief and his innovative staff team. So thank you for that. I think that we could do the same with public works. And that's where I would kindly ask the staff to please look into what else is out there that we could maybe solidify, get some matching dollars in. If there is a possibility for us even to include maybe some part-time staff members, because what's happening is that this pandemic is going to happen again. This is going to be a reoccurrence, and we just want to be ready for it. So for me, it's how do we build our staff capacity, doing it smarter, not harder? How do we expedite it, but at the same time, really find ways, which I love, the Park Champions idea by the council member Chuo, that was great. How could we invest even council members' time in expanding those services if that's needed? Because we are in a critical state, Milpitas, and we really need to be in a place where, again, we're working smarter, not harder, and that we're expanding that dollar to as much as possible. The other thing that I do want to thank staff for is really that economic development, that has been amazing. I have not seen any other city do what we're doing. So thank you so much to that team. You guys have definitely showed what Milpitas could do. And I'm so excited to see that in this presentation. Again, personally, I love all the recommendations that I see, but I'm also very mindful of what the community wants. And I've been out there and even seeing the results out of the community survey. It's safety and it's community. So for me, the parks are something that has been waiting their turn. We can no longer wait on parks. Parks need to be funded somehow. Those restorations need to happen. And for me, that is a priority because it's a priority for Milpitians. Everything else is nice and extra. The roller skating ring, all of the stuff is awesome, but we have seen that we can't fund it. So I really do think that we need to prioritize and we need to stay focused on what matters to Milpitians. And they've been saying it for years, it's parks. And I think we could definitely do a weed abatement program, just like maybe the Park Ambassador program that has launched. Where we are using, other means to fulfill that need. But for me, it's staff capacity is going to be at the forefront as I am making votes as one independent council member, and definitely aligning it with what the community is saying is important to them. So thank you so much, staff. I really appreciate all of the work that you guys are all doing. Thank you very much to my colleagues. You guys have been amazing to work with in the past couple of years, bringing in, your ideas. I really do appreciate hearing them, seeing them grow, and definitely being in implementation mode has been extremely exciting. And so with that, I yield my time. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Councilmember Chua.
Thank you, Mayor Tran. And I do echo both you, Mayor Tran, and Councilmember Dominguez. Big thanks to Lauren, to Ashwini and Walter and the rest of our executive team. Really awesome. This is great presentation, and also the substance behind it is there to support the presentation. So thank you so very much. The way I see this, Ms. Lai, there are 3 areas, at least for your side, 2 areas that you wanted specific direction from the council. I would like to go to the pension trust direction, policy direction, page 32.
Can we bring up the slide deck, please?
Not 12, 32. Okay, if I recall correctly, you're asking for direction on number 2 item, general fund pairs balance, and you wanted to carve out the $2.8 million to be divvy up in 3 years, 900,000 each for 3 years. And this is the source of funds, please correct me if I'm wrong, is from surplus of previous years. Is that correct, Ms. Lai?
That's correct.
So this is actually my only thing that I'm going to ask is this is also in line with the Councilmember Dominguez direction on our labor needs. I would like to ask, what are you going to use it for? I mean, you don't have to answer it now. I mean, you can give a big picture, but the details would come in the next few meetings. Basically, what is the need?
Correct. And that's, we're seeking feedback during this period on service levels and priority areas. The other side of that is how much funding and resources we have to be able to green light some of these ideas and proposals. The balance of those 2 will be packaged in the May 10th proposal back to council. So does that make sense, Councilwoman? We're going to take some consensus tonight, whether it be on the funding side or on the prioritization side, mold that all together and present it as a proposed budget with an enhanced service level if we're able to do that. So definitely we'll come back and explain to the public and the council the service level enhancements in terms of, like Council Dominguez says, how are we expanding the dollar as much as possible?
Yeah, if you can sometime in the future detail out where this general fund pairs balance is going, I would appreciate that. You don't have to answer that right now, but I think you're going to use this more for labor, temporary labor to do for the projects that we request or other maintenance issues, needs. Okay, I'm good with that one. On the, for the reserve policy, page 42, please. Okay, so actually, so you're asking, what's the ask, Ms. Lai?
When it comes to the policy, right now, we have direction in the policy that says fund the budget contingency and budget stabilization first. So the 18.2 million and the 18.2 million. Once we reach the goal of 2 months, which is about 16.7%, which we have here, any surplus and excess of funding these two important lines will then go through what we call a waterfall, then fund A, B, C, D, E next. Well, right now, right after budget contingency and budget stabilization, it goes to the PERS line. Knowing what we know from Bartel, what we're saying is we'd like to entertain the idea of maybe revising the policy so that after the 2 emergency reserves are funded, maybe thereafter we have a little bit more flexibility, maybe funding technology or facility replacement or other categories that we know are priorities, and then not park it in that PERS line, because based on what we know, it appears we have enough money to address with the PERS based on the assumptions in the actuarial report. So nothing to do with the 2 emergency lines down below, but it's what happens after those 2 emergency lines are funded.
I got it. So again, in the same line of requests, do detail out those excess, if that's the term, right term, and then where those funds are going after the 2 reserves are being met.
Right. In the event there is a surplus, we would explain where it went, but mostly we want to look at big picture, the policy, which drives kind of like the work that we do. So we'll be happy to bring that back when we come back in May and kind of fine tune that a little bit for council consideration.
So I'm okay with that one as well in terms
of do a point of information, Councilmember Chua.
Yes.
I really love where this discussion point is. And your question is very much the same question I had asked. And one thing I do want to note is our PERS stabilization fund has returned to its pre-pandemic levels. And I think that's really a key dollar amount that allowed for me to consider this financial strategy before us. We do take great pride. I think 60, I forgot, it was 60 something percent of our general fund, and which is like number 2 in the county for cities. But, you know, that is a really key point to get back above the surface with that PERS stabilization fund. And the financial strategy that's being presented to us tonight is really a 3-year strategy pertaining to that line item so that we can have some flexibility during this recovery. I do think it's an amount that's very reasonable. I just wanted to share with you some of my thoughts and share our thoughts. Perhaps we can really drive better policy. So back to you, Councilmember Chua.
Thank you, Mayor, for that information. Are we going to be on that at that level, Ms. Lai? Well, what the Mayor said in terms of pre-pandemic reserve?
Yeah, as you could see there on this slide here, what it shows is that in the unassigned, we're at $38 million, and in the PERS line above, if we actually, where we have $2.8 million, if the policy for reserve did not require that the excess go to the PERS line, that $2.8 million would probably sit in the contingency or budget stabilization. And if that was the case, we would add 2.8 million to the 38 million, bringing it up to almost $41 million, right? So if you read to the left, $41 million compares that to the pre-pandemic level of 40.6 million. So
Okay.
that's the mayor's point, right?
Yes. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Councilmember Chua. Yeah, you know, it's like our job is to
you.
leave the city better than how we found it. And I think through this budget strategy, that a particular fund is not any less than when we arrived here in recent years. So that's very encouraging.
Thank you, Mayor. The next one is page 31, please. One of the recommendations I think that you were asking direction for is right at the bottom right there. Consider reallocation of funds, for example, to enhance assistance to businesses and house beautification, illegal dumping. This is looking at the ARPA. Even though we allocated these funds already, we can reallocate depending on the needs. That's what I'm trying to say. This is, of course, we've given this a go ahead, but what I'm trying to emphasize is we can look at it. It's got to be an ongoing thing. That's why we divvy it up into first year, second year, third year, and fourth year, two iterations of grants. That's all I wanted to say. Is that correct, Ms. Lai?
That's correct. And we always try to assess what we've learned, especially in these various programs. And that's absolutely correct. We want to put it out there that we're going to learn from what we've seen already and then make some recommendations to council as it pertains to this funding source.
Okay. For the referral, page 80. I know it's going to be, I'm pretty sure the specification will change on each one of these items after you get feedback from the sponsors, I would think, right, Ms. Lai? Because these are just overview or it's the conceptual for each item. I think later on it will be more firm after a thorough specification for each project or item requested. So my question is, we're looking at considerable amount here. Can we use some of the ARPA funding for some of these?
Yes. We have our ARPA money in a category called revenue loss under the federal rules, as long as we're procuring city services and not putting it into three areas: pension, debt, or reserve.
Legal, right?
Yeah. Yes. So we can't boost our reserve with it. We can't restore tax that went up during this period, like let those taxes, roll back those taxes or put them towards pension. So
Okay.
the answer is yes.
That's what I'm saying. If we should probably revisit this during the process of budgeting, if we can carve out some funds from ARPA and
Right.
redirect it to higher priorities, like has been items that have been discussed. On the page, this is my last two ones. On page 29, please. In line with carving some ARPA funding. 29. The next one, please. The next one, please. Oh, okay. Go back one, please. Okay, so after our ARPA meeting last time, I realized that that we didn't address climate change or reduction of green gas emission or increase electrification. Is something about climate change, you know, environmental sustainability. We didn't address that on any of these projects that we have. That being said, I don't know if this is the right place to do it because of item number 9. I allocated like $20,000 for 20 storefronts on Main Street, but we only got 3 applicants, which is about 60,000, maybe another in the process, maybe 80,000. So in that sense, I would like to carve out 60,000 to go to environmental sustainability projects, which the Energy and Sustainability Commission is working on some projects currently. I just want to throw that out. And the last one is the CIP projects. Because we're putting in about $4.3 million for the 12 parks, I would like to see how a project plan on how we're going to do these projects to make these 12 parks safe and usable. I would like to see a project plan in conjunction with the other projects that we're going to do in the next fiscal year. I'm not looking at 5 years. I'm looking at 5 years, but I would like to look at the next fiscal year as well. So that's my ask. Is that clear?
Can you articulate what is a project plan? Because
okay, we have 12 parks that we funded to make it safe and usable, $4.3 million. So what I'm asking is, how are we going to plan this 12 parks to be done in the next, you know, they've been waiting for a long time because I want them to be on top of the priority because they're already funded. All we need to do is put them in the plan. So that's what I'm asking. Is that maybe I can ask Ashwini. Am I clear on that one, Ashwini?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Chua. So you're right that these are funded. They will require some staffing to actually work on these projects. That's part of the budget consideration as we're looking at staffing resources. So with the staffing that engineering has currently, it's not going to be possible to deliver all of them at the same time. And so we'll definitely put a plan together and bring that forward. And maybe if Director of Engineering Erickson, if he wants to chime in, but we can maybe bring something forward as part of the CIP. So you can, the discussion that we have on February 8th, so you can see where some of the projects may be envisioned more in outer fiscal years and not in 22, 20.
Ashwini, is the 4.3 million, does it include soft and hard costs?
Yes, it will. All CIP projects should include the total cost of the project. So whatever it takes to deliver it, including design, construction, management, that's what but again, we need to have resources, and I'll let Director Erickson speak to it if he wants to add something.
Right, I don't have anything else to add. You basically nailed it, Ashwini. Our plan was to try to start the ARPA park projects this spring when we could free up some staff that are busy with other projects, and we'd start with the required request for proposal process to meet federal requirements for use of ARPA funding. But again, being able to start the process is going to be dependent on staff availability.
Steve, Mr. Erickson, what I would like to see is how are you going to plan out the 12 enhancements, the 12 parks to be ready for use? That's all I'm looking for.
Right, understood. You're looking for a work plan, see how it fits in with the other work that we have going on as well.
Exactly. You got it.
Right.
Thank you.
Perhaps, and a really interesting topic here, parks. Perhaps the CIP plan will show each year and which year those parks will fall into 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Back to you, Councilmember Cho.
That's all I have. And thank you again to staff. Really amazing, really great. And congratulations. I've looked at the accomplishments and I'm kind of proud to be part of it. My first year, you've done a lot, and kudos to all of you. And thank you again. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Good vibes, Councilmember Chua. Appreciate you. I do want to take a moment to follow up on Councilmember Chua's recommendations and such. I would like to take some leadership right now, and under the council referrals, I would like to postpone the item for term limits for elected officials. We can postpone that. That's my recommendation to perhaps after the sales tax expires, or during this recovery time. That may be not a priority. The term limits. That is my idea back in 2017 in the Milpitas Post. And I will volunteer first to postpone the term limits due to the cost, if that helps the drop in the bucket. So next up with the virtual raised hand, we do have our city manager. Did you want to take a moment here before we continue?
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to comment on Councilmember Chua's comments, which reminded me when we were talking about the CIP at the last council meeting. Councilmember Chua did mention about the pickleball pilot program, and I suggested that this would be a good time at this meeting to bring it up under CIP, because we have our study session on CIP in a couple meetings out. The staff would be best prepared if that was mentioned in tonight's meeting.
Go ahead, Councilmember Chua. I think you got the nod. So throw it out there.
I saw it there, but there's a TBD, to be determined. So we have to wait for that cost before we can say anything, right?
Actually, no, it's just exploration.
I know.
Just let us know, give us a nod that is something you'd like us to see, and we will.
Yes, I will say yes on behalf. Yes, Councilmember Chua.
We will have that formal direction from the council. Thank you very much.
Yes, please. I think we have consensus of that, even Councilmember Pan and Vice Mayor, and also everybody.
Hearing no objections.
Right.
There you go. You put a pickleball on the agenda, or within the CIP meeting. So, I think tonight is a great opportunity to really look at the overall financial picture of our city government, and seeing the numbers, it'll give us an idea of really what our limits are for this fiscal year. So with that, throwing out the really dedication and commitment to pickleball, I think it makes total sense. Thank you very much, Councilmember Chua. Let's go with the next virtual raised hand, Councilmember Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Yes, I thank you so much, Councilmember Chua, for bringing up the pickleball, because as you were talking, one of the things that I would like to see is also either the CIP definitely bringing in the pilot program, but also maybe looking at the actual cost of developing the pickleball courts above a pilot program if we didn't do it. So if we had the opportunity to fund something through ARPA, would that be a possibility? So I would like staff to come back with that proposal just to see how much it would cost. Because if we have the opportunity to fund it now, then personally, I wouldn't want it in a CIP. I would want to try to do it now. And so with that too, I would also like to ask staff to come back with the parks that were not funded, because not all parks got funded to their capacity, because I remember we had that conversation. But now that I am seeing that there might be a possibility for the extra funding that was presented, for funding to be allocated, it would be great to be already prepared with those numbers in the case that we're able to push in a park or two that were not funded in that initial direction. So I would like to see those numbers from staff and have them ready for when we have these conversations, just to see if there's an opportunity to fund those parks, because I do think that the parks that have been funded, which are the 12, but there are some of the smaller parks without bathrooms that did not make the list. And so I want to make sure that those parks are not forgotten as we move through these conversations, because I've gotten a lot of communication from constituents that they want those parks at least at the next level of use. And unfortunately, they have not been touched for a while. So that would be my request in terms of what I would like to see, just so we could be prepared to make some decisions as we continue these ongoing conversations. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll certainly explore the parks at the CIP meeting in 2 weeks from today, but who's counting? We'll explore it then and there, and we'll see what the bandwidth is for our engineering department, among other personnel. Next up, we have Vice Mayor Montano.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to give thanks to the staff for such a great presentation. You've really done a great job. Charmaine, I really did like your presentation on the community survey. And from years and years of this community survey asking the community what are their priorities, public safety is always, if you notice, it's always number one. And I want to thank the council for always making sure that our first responders are funded to the level where our citizens will be felt, safe. This is one of the reasons why most people move to Milpitas, is because of our public safety. Also, the neighborhoods and housing is another area that the council has prioritized. I'm really glad that we're looking in that direction. So I know that this is going to be a fluid budget and we can change things, move around. So I'd like to ask staff, I know that we have our reserves are looking, there's light at the end of the tunnel with this pandemic. And from my understanding, we have reached we're almost there at that peak of the pandemic. So there is going to be some stabilization. I'm being optimistic. What I would like to ask is the funding for, is there going to be funding for these deferred projects that I saw on one of your slides? Can you put that slide up that you deferred because of the funding?
You're referring to the slide pertaining to potential impacts, what's
Right.
not included, Vice Mayor?
Yes, that one, please.
That'll come out more specifically when we do the CIP study session. There's usually a section where we summarize the unfunded projects. This last year, it was in the tune of about $70 million over a 5-year period. And that doesn't necessarily include projects beyond the 5-year horizon. So no, we have unfunded projects that still remain unfunded, even if we choose to use that menu of options that I put before council, because that menu is a finite amount of money and we just need to use it judiciously. So again, prioritizing the unfunded, whether it might be a few small parks or a couple of other things, but we still have a long ways to go to fund the portfolio of infrastructure that we need some attention. I tie that to that conversation about policy, right? Because it's the policy discussion about reserves that may give us some flexibility to take any surplus beyond those emergency reserves and then put them maybe into the infrastructure budget or the technology budget, just as two examples.
Right. So that infrastructure budget is the facilities, correct? Well, that includes one.
Correct. So right now we have $7 million in there. One of the things we'd like to do when we come back in May is also talk about maybe the spending plan or how we use some of these categories that we've set aside in the past. So.
Okay, great. Can you, not now, but in the future, give me a list of the reserves that other cities in our valley, I'm just curious to find out what are their reserves I'm comparing to ours. And you can give me that information later.
We have it, Vice Mayor, we have it. It's on slide 43. So may we get some help putting up slide 43, please?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
So this represents our research that was done based on audited financial statements. These are very reputable jurisdictions that we are in this just broader kind of Bay Area. And as you could see there, it measures a lot of the unassigned category. There's different names because each jurisdiction has some prerogative as to how they want to name them, but more or less it's the unassigned category plus our PERS savings. And you could see there that we have 68.3 million in 1920. And then we rank second. This is 61% of our operating budget when we measure it against our budget of about 115 million back then. So this, I think, is very illustrative. And when the audited financial statements for 20 and 21 are published online for these jurisdictions, we'll continue to benchmark ourselves just to make sure that we're maintaining best practices, Vice Mayor.
Okay, great. But I was curious about the other cities that are not, specifically in Santa Clara County. And, if you can give me a list later on, just, I saw this earlier, but
okay.
I'm just curious about each and every city the 13 cities that are in this county.
Super. So the ask is to do this survey as best as we can with a more comprehensive list of Santa Clara County. And so what we'll do is we'll ask staff to go on these city websites. Some do and don't publish all this information. So we'll ascertain as much as we can. Good feedback.
Thank you. And also my other question is on, do you feel that we are heading to have a structurally balanced, structurally balanced budget?
Yes, we're there now. We're there now, and that's the strategy that we want to maintain going forward. That's why I qualify that menu of strategies to say we want to offer a menu of strategy because that's how we add value to the governance process. But we also caution spending too much because we want to continue to be mindful of being structurally balanced and prioritizing what we spend.
Right. That's key to have a structurally balanced budget. That to me, that allows us to do things for our community, make sure that our departments are well funded. And I'm glad that we're heading in that, or we are in that direction, going that direction. The other thing is I also want to thank our council members for pushing for Measure, and the staff for pushing for Measure F. I think if we didn't have Measure F, I don't think we would be where we are at today. And also the unions for the concessions. I mean, we all work together to make sure that we had a good budget. I know we had to give up some of our wants, or our needs, but at least we were able to have a budget where we can work well with to make sure we provide things for our community. So with that, thank you so much. You did an awesome job, and I appreciate all your help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Montano, for your pointed topics and feedback. I enjoyed it and appreciate you very much. And to follow up on the Vice Mayor, it's really been the worst time during this pandemic. And it's really thanks to our community, the voters for passing Measure F. But even furthermore, we cannot forget about Measure R. Measure R, that was in recent times as well. It took a lot of courage from our elected officials to go forward into the community to advocate for the tax increases. I can't remember another time period in our city's history where we raised the taxes as a community of voters twice in a short amount of time. City staff certainly was very supportive with all the thorough information and comprehensive information that the council members and elected officials needed to go out and pitch an argument to the community. I can remember those days and those meetings. There were a lot of questions for the proposed tax hikes. And looking back from today, truly grateful for everybody's support. And we are in such a blessed financial position now. I'm not saying it's great. Still got most of the distance to go, but we could be in a lot worse places right now. And so as a city hall, as one unit, just really grateful for everybody's contributions, just as much as our residents in supporting the tax increases. And, you know, our oversight committee is doing a fine job. I did tune in to the last meeting on YouTube. I kind of watched the replay and to see, I think our finance director, Lauren Lai, was leading that meeting, and just really great to see the work being done that oftentimes is overshadowed. And so just want to take a moment there to reflect on how we're here today with the dollars that we have. Next up, we have Councilmember Chua.
I'm just going to be brief. I just want to follow up, piggybacking on Vice Mayor's request. If Ms. Lai, if you can include the total amount of for each cities in Santa Clara County, if you can include the need, what do you call it, the miscellaneous total amount and the safety total amount for each city. That would give us a very good picture to do statistical analysis on the percentage of the reserve versus the actual needs.
Okay, I didn't understand the miscellaneous versus safety. Can you clarify that again, please?
Isn't that you broke down the reserves into two categories, miscellaneous and safety?
No. So if I may get some assistance to pull up slide 42, from an accounting perspective, we have these different categories of reserves. If I may get slide 42 pulled up. The reserve.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
It's really the unassigned. All these other categories are committed, like non-spendable. Who concerns themselves with non-spendable? Because this is like advances and deferrals, right? Committed means the governance body's already committed it. The assigned is like POs, and then the unassigned. So for us, the PERS isn't committed. There's some flexibility there, but we will look at the various jurisdiction financial statements, and then we will discern from that something that is comparable. So
I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at, you have another slide. I think it's before this one. It shows the breakdown of the unfunded liabilities into two.
Oh, okay. Are you referring to, let's help get us to slide number 34, please?
I think that's the one.
Are you referring to the unfunded liability balance?
Right.
Okay, well, we could do that. So what I'm hearing is you'd like staff to pull maybe a summary of the unfunded liability balance by jurisdiction, like total the 58 million and the 120 million or so, 12 million of safety.
Yeah, I just want to compare us in terms of unfunded liabilities to other cities, because I know we have 58 for miscellaneous and 112 for safety. And we have a reserve for $33.4 million. I want to compare how we stand with the other cities. How are they, what percentage of reserves do they have in terms of their unfunded liabilities? That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think that's really great. We can do that. That information is available on the city's, on the CalPERS website. Just keep in mind that they will not have the June 30th, 21 number because we hired Bartel. Just keep that in mind, okay? Because this drop is a $60 million drop. And so that'll change the results a bit, but we can give you kind of a benchmark of it.
Perfect.
Okay, we can do that.
All. Yes, it gives you us a comfort level on how we stand.
I see it as another data point for your policy decision, and I totally respect that. Happy to do it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And my last one is Ms. Kantak, on the referrals, are you asking us to pull the projects that we want to get done? Is that it? And
thank you, Councilmember Chua. So the reason for kind of just bringing these forward today is just to kind of highlight the fact that these are as part of the budget development process, in addition to anything we were going to hear from you today in terms of priorities, that these are things that council has already said they're interested in moving forward, but that really do not have the funding identified or the resources identified. So we were hoping if there's any additional feedback, like Mayor Tran said, maybe he's willing to defer some of the items. There may be additional feedback from any of these items, whether it's a deferral or that it's really a priority and we should make sure we try to accommodate it in the budget development process. That's the kind of feedback we were looking for today, and just so that you can kind of see it comprehensively and see that there are a lot of items that do not have funding. Now, as Lauren and I have mentioned earlier, right now, during this period of the budget development process, we're in listening mode. So we're not necessarily saying, tell us exactly which ones. We haven't brought forward any specific proposals. So we're trying to kind of gather input, take information from the community, and then see how to best put it all together to bring you a balanced budget. But any feedback you have on any of these items would be greatly appreciated.
so for number 8, Park Champions, since it's only 17,000, and will that be eligible for our ARPA funding?
Yes, it should be. I mean, it's not any of those categories that it's not. Some of the considerations, as you've heard us bring in the report we brought in early January, for some items, even though the funding may not be much, if there's procurement involved or things that we need to do that are very staff intensive, then it doesn't make sense to fund through ARPA.
Okay, so in that sense, I would like to request to move this item, Park Champions, and look into funding through ARPA, and if not, go to the general fund. But I prefer to get it from ARPA.
Thank you very much, Councilmember
Thank
Chu. If
you.
I may, yes, you're welcome. I do a little point here. Point of, let's see, which point do I want to use here? Maybe point of inquiry. So, yeah, I think today we may not need to look at the funding source exactly. I believe in the upcoming meetings we'll have the opportunity to really pinpoint the funding source, whether it's ARPA or any other fund. Some of these are impact fees and art funds that have been ready to be given back to the community, so to say. So, yeah, we'll take a look at the next meetings. But if anything jumps out at you, I think today's not a bad day to kind of acknowledge that. But we'll have plenty of meetings to really get the X-Acto knife out and sharpen up every penny. So I appreciate your effort and your heart, Councilmember Chua. Yeah, I look forward to supporting your recommendation. Okay, great. Next up with the virtual raised hand, we have Councilmember Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. One of the things, I don't know how much work staff have done. Personally, I do think it's really important to look into term limits for the mayor and possibly council members, but for sure the mayor's seat. I would like to have all of the information. I'm also a citizen. And so if you could please forward me the information on how a citizen could get signatures to put this on the ballot without the city being involved. So I'm not too sure how much homework has been done on staff end, but I am really interested in knowing how a citizen could put a ballot measure on the ballot for 2022. And I'm interested in looking at terming the mayor's seat. I believe in diversifying the leadership of the city, and the community has said this is a very, very important item. We need to diversify the leadership. And when we don't have term limits, we got the same leaders cycling through seats. And that's something that Milpitas is extremely tired of. And I'm extremely fed up with it myself. So I think it's important for us to diversify our leadership and bring up new leaders. If not, the city is not going to grow. So I am perfectly okay with moving forward. Thank you so much, Mayor, for your kind consideration so we could save money on the city end. But I would like to explore it as a citizen and move it forward however I could as a citizen of Milpitas. So if you guys could please send that information to me, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you,
Wow.
Councilmember.
Oh, wow. That was, wow. Thank you. A lot of attention. Flattered. Let's reach into the third floor at City Hall. Let's go to, I want to go with our Deputy City Manager, Walter. In the event there's a measure brought forward by our residents through a petition and that it's certified, how much would that election cost to our taxpayers here at City Hall?
Srini may respond as well, but the cost will be pretty much the same, I would say. But there was probably maybe additional cost for the certification of the signatures, verification of the signatures, which were submitted, and to make sure that the threshold for signatures is passed, and the registered voters would probably charge us for that. How much it really is, I don't know.
Okay, just checking. Thank you. Okay, great. Next up with the virtual raised hand, we have the Vice Mayor, Carmen Montano.
Thank you, Mayor. So Ashwini, you wanted us to give some input on some of the referrals. So it's when the skate, I think that's item, let's see, what item is that? The skate, roller skate one, what was that? Which item was
Roller
that?
skate program. Yeah, if we can.
Yeah, I was the author for that, and I think I recall Director Lawrenson saying that it was going to cost about that much, and then I think she said it was for a week, but I was, as the author, I was thinking for it to be a weekend. So perhaps the authors of all these items can give feedback to the staff, so that way that we can be in line, because I didn't want it to be a whole week. It was just going to, my goal was just to have it for a weekend or maybe 3 days. So I don't think it'll cost that much. What is on there, 152,000. So I'd like to make that recommendation. And also for the Rose Garden, I'm the author for that one as well. And on there, it mentions that, what is that? So on there, it mentions that a staff will be maintaining it, but I was thinking that we can have volunteers maintaining it, since it is a children's memorial site, and to have roses there. And I don't think it's, that was part of the plan, but I don't think staff knew that was what was intentioned. So those are my thoughts that perhaps before it comes back, we can give some input to staff on what is, all the details. So that way we can come up with a better number, a more accurate number.
Thank you, Vice
Point of
Mayor.
information. I want to jump in with the point of information. Last year as mayor, I'm trying to use all the points I can, respectfully. But point of information, I think, Vice Mayor, if I may, yes, I really appreciate your cost savings brainstorming and your cost saving strategies. I look at these numbers as amounts not to exceed in terms of the funding. But obviously, certainly there are some cost cutting measures. A lot of these costs are really itemized to personnel, kind of staffing these events. And I think that's an excellent proposal, Vice Mayor, to sort of limit the labor cost, if I may say so. Certainly, these are amounts not to exceed. Perhaps the final amounts and expenses for these items can be meaningfully lower than what's listed here on the slide. My apologies for interrupting, Ashwini, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just thanking Vice Mayor, and what we will do is follow up with the authors of each of these requests.
Okay, great.
For additional information before we bring it back. Thank you.
All right, great. That would be excellent.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go to the virtual raised hands here. I really want to thank everybody, trying to get everybody involved here. So next up here, Councilmember Fan.
Thank you. Very insightful presentation. I'm very pleased with staff's work on the budget this year. Obviously, we are trying our best in these difficult times, and despite all that, I think the budget still looks fairly balanced, and will be able to address a lot of our community's needs and concerns while providing essential services. In regards to the survey that was done by FM3, is that an ongoing survey or has it concluded?
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. It has concluded. So the survey has been done. We just got the top line results for this meeting, and they just need a little bit more time to provide us more detailed information, which we'll bring to council soon.
I see. Okay. I think that more of the crosstabs would be really helpful in order for us to fully assess the community's needs, as well as the questions that were asked. I'd like to see that data. If it's not, if it's too much information to be included in the packet, I'd love that information to just go out to the council at the very least. Let's see. I know it's easy to ask for other cities' data as a comparison point, but I would caution the council on doing so in regards to budget. The whole reason why we do these community surveys is because our community's needs are distinct to Milpitas. I mean, sometimes, you will see some overlap with other communities, but at the end of the day, I think the budgetary concerns of every city should be assessed distinctively. That said, I look forward to getting more information from our polling partner in order to move forward. So far, I do support, all the staff recommendations so far.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Fan. And next up, we're going to the Vice Mayor, Carmen Montano.
Thank you. So I had a clarification on the mayor limits. Does that include the council member limits? I'm wondering why that's not on there. Staff.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So we have two separate referrals. One of them is related to mayoral terms as well as council member terms, so the consecutive terms. And then the other one is related to the directly elected mayor, possibly converting to a rotational mayor. So there's two separate items. So yes, both terms are on there, council member as well as mayor. So council member, I think there was some discussion about going from 3 consecutive terms to 2 consecutive terms. And then for the mayor, going from a 2-year term to a 4-year term. So there's many ideas, which is why we will bring more information forward if the council desires, but there could be potentially 1 to 3 ballot measures depending on what moves forward.
Okay, because yeah, so that's what, well, I'm the author for the reducing 12 years to 8 years. And so that way we can get new ideas, having more diversity, diverse ideas. That was my goal. But that's why it's here. I'm just curious why I just said the mayor. But I guess you're going to bring this back and revise it. I'm not sure.
It should say both.
Did it say both?
Yeah, it combines it. It's mayor and council member term limits.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, for mayor and council members. So for both.
70,000 per ballot measure. Did I read that right?
Yes, Mayor Tran, and that does include not just the cost of the ballot measure, but associated staffing costs, information dissemination, all of that. So it's an estimate. This was done some time ago. So actually our city clerk is reaching out again to the registrar of voters to get more current cost information.
Costs will only go up with the more voters that are registered. Just putting the information out there, folks. I appreciate your time. Vice Mayor Montano, does that conclude your current remarks?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, great. Really great feedback. Just certainly a variety of feedback here for this item tonight. We'll do a time check. It's 8:36, and I'm really glad everybody is socially distanced, either at home, perhaps on city property. If we were in person pre-COVID, we'd be in that senior center room. It's a cold room, if I may say, with the tables in a U shape, and folks are sitting on these chairs, and we are elbow to elbow, and I'm elbowing the vice mayor, Carmen, scoot over, but we're looking at the clock on the wall, the projectors going on. And so I'm glad everybody's safely comfortable where you're at. And your comfort and really that sort of happiness level there is something that I'm very thankful for as we go through this budget process. And it's really been an efficient meeting. We already took public comment. Really, I remember some of these meetings were in there till past 10. And so it speaks a lot of volume for our city staff, every department, and it speaks a lot for our council members as well. Certainly a very seasoned group that I appreciate all around for your experience and being prepared for this meeting tonight. So let's go to our finance director to see what we have more.
I just want to know if you would give us permission for us to put the calendar to remind folks that we would love for their engagement. So before you close out, if we could have 32 seconds.
Absolutely, you can have
all
the time you need. Yeah, absolutely. I can't stop.
Fantastic. Well, you can. You are the mayor, but I appreciate your patience.
I can't adjourn this meeting unless the council supports me, but please.
Folks, this is the calendar for our public engagement for both the capital project planning and also the budget itself. So just want to encourage everyone to engage in these upcoming few months, through all the channels that our PIO Charmaine has shared, and that we'll post this online as well. So back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Director Lai. And let's go to our city manager, Stephen McHarris, before we close it out.
Well, I just want to thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. You did an awesome job tonight. I know that staff, I have to thank staff again for all the hard work. There's a number of hours, several weekends. I can attest this last weekend, all of us were working long hours to make sure this meeting went smoothly and efficiently. And we can attest to that time. We were betting you'd be done before 9, so you met our expectations as well. So I thank you all for the valuable input, and it's going to be back to work tomorrow, assessing all the information you gave us and all the direction. So that's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you very much, our city manager, Steve McHarris. Sort of my parting words is, no year in this city is an easy year. Every year presents different challenges, but I am very confident that this season won't be as challenging as last season. As mentioned with the CSA presentation, we had a lot on our plates with ARPA and not even understanding what ARPA was. And it's just completely different this year in terms of understanding our financial strategy. And we're going to get to June very smoothly. And so I expect for every budget meeting to be very efficient, most impactful for our residents. And we'll adjourn at every one of these meetings for everybody. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.